Well, folks, it is finally that time. Here we are with the last of the albums in the Deer Hunter's masterful series that is the Acts. Act 5, Hymns with the Devil and Confessional. This is one of those rare albums that does everything right and somehow does the impossible in being a worthy follow-up to the perfection that was Act 4. Act 5 was the first Deer Hunter album that was released after I had started listening to the band. I loved their music and had been listening to every album they had made, but getting to be there for the release of Act 5 was something special. I stayed up until midnight for it to drop and listened to it all the way through. Then, the next night, I invited my two friends over who also loved the Deer Hunter, and we lit a fire in my backyard and had a listening party. It was a truly special experience that helped solidify this album as one of the all-time greats for me. I suppose the elephant in the room is Act 6. This story was originally envisioned by Casey to be a 6-act story, but he has all but confirmed that Act 6 won't happen. The consensus seems to be that Act 6 wouldn't be an album, but rather some other form of media, so I will be treating this story as if it is over by the end of this album. The story ties off nicely anyway, so it's not like we're missing a whole ton of information without Act 6. If they were to release an Act 6, I honestly would have no idea what it would be about, given how this album ends, but I won't spoil that for you now. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and please subscribe if you haven't. Making these Deer Hunter videos has been so incredibly fun for me, but it's also been a lot of hard work. I just do this for fun on the side, and there are dozens of hours that go into each video. The support has been amazing, and I was even recognized by a couple people at the Deer Hunter concert in Seattle, which was a ton of fun for me. This band is really special to me, and I'm glad that I can play a part in helping others understand the masterful story that the band crafted with these albums. Before we get into the proper analysis of the story of Act 5, we have to do our last recap of the series so far. If you've seen my other videos, then you can feel free to skip this section. If this is the first of my videos that you are watching, then I highly recommend you go back and watch the others before this one. But if you're only interested in the story of Act 5, then I can hardly blame you. There's a lot of really cool stuff that happens in this album. This is where everything in our story comes to a head. But anyways, here's the recap. In the late 1800s in the United States, a woman named Miss Therese gives birth to a child who she names Hunter. Hunter lives his entire life up until adulthood as a sheltered child living on a homestead by a lake. The reason for Miss Therese's isolation of Hunter is that she doesn't have the best view of the world. She is a sex worker who works at the Dime, a brothel that coerces young women into working for them while encouraging the men to be rough with the ladies. This brothel is owned by the Pimp and the Priest, a brutal, greedy man who is both the owner of the Dime and the priest in charge of the town's church. He entices men to commit sins with the woman of the Dime and then charges them in order to be forgiven of those sins. The Pimp and the Priest is always depicted as wearing a mask, so the rest of the town does not know the relationship between the Dime and the church. Miss Therese was one of the few people that knew the truth of his double identity. After a life of hardship and misery, Miss Therese forbids Hunter from going to the city where she works. As Hunter is entering adulthood, Miss Therese takes her own life, and Hunter decides to go to the town in order to find some meaning and answers in life. Hunter comes across the Oracles, a group of spirits with prophetic ability that essentially tell him to face his problems head-on and not to be ashamed of his love. Hunter makes it to the city and is enticed by a woman, Misleading, into sleeping with her at the Dime. Her name is Misleading, by the way. I wasn't just saying the word misleading. It's confusing. After a passionate night together, Hunter assumes that the two of them are in love, not knowing what a brothel is. When he wakes up, she is gone and he comes face to face with the Pimp and the Priest, who offers him a job as Misleading's driver. Hunter accepts. Misleading and Hunter start a relationship. She feels bad for him and sees that he isn't like the other men that take advantage of her. Despite this budding romance, Hunter is oblivious to the fact that he is driving her around town to meet other men. One day, Hunter runs inside the house where Misleading is working at and sees her with another man. Embarrassed and furious, he dumps Misleading and convinces himself that she never loved him. This isn't true, however, as her feelings for him are real but complicated. After a bitter exchange between Hunter and Misleading, Hunter goes against the advice of the Oracles and gets on a boat to leave the city. Sometime later, Hunter is conscripted into World War I. The Oracles appear to tell Hunter again and tell him that joining the army might be the only way to save his soul. If he listens to their advice and keeps his head up, he can still be saved. War is hell for Hunter. He fights a terrible battle before stumbling upon a shack with a woman who poisons everyone who crosses her path. The woman takes pity on Hunter, however, and spares him, leaving him with the bottle of poison that she uses to poison the other soldiers. After another vicious battle, Hunter is saved by another group of soldiers. In this group is a crude, vile man and his son. The man tells the soldiers of his time spent at the dime. Hunter connects the dots and realizes that this man is his father. The son in the group of soldiers is Hunter's half-brother. Hunter travels with the father and son until another battle leaves the son mortally wounded. Hunter says goodbye to his brother, and realizing that they look strikingly similar, plots to assume his identity in order to leave behind his own troubled past. Tying up these loose ends, Hunter poisons his father with the bottle given to him by the woman, steals the dog tags off the brother's body, and returns home from the war, ready to leave his old life of sorrow behind and begin anew as his half-brother. Hunter returns home from the war and heads back to the city that he left back at the end of Act 2. It is there that he finds the mother, or the mother of his half-brother. It is unclear whether the mother is able to tell that Hunter isn't her son, but the two of them live together for some time regardless. This new life that Hunter has created for himself seems to be ideal at first. He is back where he started with a mother figure to love and take care of. This all comes crashing back down on him when the mother passes away suddenly. Reeling from the death of the mother, Hunter spreads her ashes in the river and is then picked up by some friends of the son. They have a wild night on the town together, but the friends seem confused at Hunter's inability to recall memories that the friends shared. This is of course because Hunter isn't who he says he is and doesn't have those memories. After a night of partying, Hunter stumbles around drunk in the city and catches a glimpse of Miss Leading. She is still living in the city, and Hunter considers trying to rekindle the relationship, but he decides against this in order not to give away his true identity. Eventually, Hunter is discovered in a drunken stupor by the fiancée. She was engaged to the son before he went off to war, and has mistakenly recognized Hunter as her own missing lover. She seems to know that something is off, but she still tries to make the relationship work regardless. The two of them head off to the church in the morning, where Hunter yet again comes face to face with the pimp and the priest. After a twisted sermon designed to squeeze as much money as possible out of the congregation, Hunter decides to keep his distance from the pimp and the priest, as he fears he will be recognized by him. Hunter now makes it his mission to destroy the pimp and the priest, and in order to do that, he needs to become more powerful than he is now. He runs for mayor and wins the election. The son was quite popular before he left for the war, and the town is happy to make him their new leader. With his newfound power, Hunter orders the closing of the dime and decides to fully abandon the vestiges of his old life as Hunter. His transition into the son is complete. The fiancée reveals that she knows that he isn't her true lover, and they decide to part ways. Now that Hunter is on top, the pimp and the priest makes his true intentions known. He reveals to Hunter that he knows who he truly is and threatens to reveal his secret to the rest of the town unless Hunter protects him and stays out of his way. Distraught but with no better option, Hunter takes the deal. It is with this deal with the devil that we start our journey into the final chapter to this sad tale. Act 5, Hymns with the Devil in Confessional. Track 1, Regress. Our first track on the album is one of the most beautiful openings to an album that I have ever heard. I go back and forth on whether I like this song or Writing on a Wall of Act 3 more, but they are both nearly perfect, so it doesn't matter that much. This song marks the final time that the oracles appear to Hunter. They have tried to guide him throughout his life, and Hunter has regularly disregarded their advice. They are not too happy about how he has lived his life up to this point, and sing their parting words to him. Regress in Spells of Unconsciousness. To regress is to return back to a previous point in your life. Act 4 was all about Hunter bringing himself to the same spot that he ended Act 2 in, and this is the first line that only serves to strengthen that point. The circumstances of his life are different. He's the mayor now, but he is again powerless to defeat the evil in his life. The spells of unconsciousness that Hunter experiences are due to his new fascination, opium. He is now addicted to the drug and spends his time passed out and high. It is the only way that he can cope with the terrible life that he has made for himself. I think it is safe to say that Hunter is at his lowest point. He is probably still reeling from PTSD, but still has to keep up the appearances as the mayor. Beyond that, the only reason he ever wanted to become leader of the city was to stop the pimp and the priest, and now he is a pawn to that vile man. Slave to the seeds you've sown. Hunter's decisions that he has made are now controlling his life. His decision to become the sun has backfired, and he can't do anything to stop it now. In the past video, we talked a lot about how Hunter was doing so much work to rise above his circumstances. Now he is a slave to those circumstances. Another clever reference that might be being made here is that opium is extracted from poppy seeds. In that way, Hunter is a slave to the opium, which literally comes from seeds. I'm not sure if this was intentional, but I wouldn't put it past Casey. He loves wordplay like that. Lost in the leaves. Hunter is now lost in this life. He has found himself lost in the direction that the oracles previously gave him. It was hinted at on the last album that Hunter may not have understood their directions, but I personally believe that Hunter willingly disobeyed their advice. While he has certainly felt lost before, Hunter is at a worse state than he ever was. He was never addicted to anything before, and now he truly has no one in his life. He isn't with Misleading or the fiancé. Both his birth mother and his surrogate mother are dead, and the only person he could truly confide in about his double identity is the pimp and the priest. So we'll depart, goodbye to your stubborn heart, now you're alone. As if it wasn't bad before, Hunter doesn't even have the oracles now. I find these lines interesting because it seems that the oracles feel personally slighted by Hunter's decisions. They call him stubborn before they leave him for good. This makes sense as they really only seem to want to help him. They took pity on the boy that was wandering into his own demise back at the beginning of Act 2. They told Hunter not to be ashamed of his love, be himself, and face his problems. Hunter failed at all three of those tasks. He was ashamed of his relationship with Misleading, which caused him to flee to the city and go to war. When he was in the war, he was told to keep his eyes alert and to be himself. Instead, he ran from the conflict and assumed the identity of the sun. Casey has said that the story of the acts is about a boy who doesn't make a single right decision in the entire story. The oracles seem to share the same sentiment and are finally done trying to care for someone who seems addicted to spurning their advice and doing his own thing. Find relief, the end comes swiftly for you. And here we have the parting words of the oracles. They tell Hunter that the only relief he may find is that his life will soon be over. They depart and leave Hunter on his own. We are unsure if this even bothers him, however. He has ignored them up to this point, and why should it make a difference whether they leave him now? In this video, as the characters that we know and love make their final appearances, I will do some reflection on their journeys up to this point. I really love the oracles. They are these cool, spooky, and mysterious spirits that give cryptic advice to Hunter. I always imagine them to be the band itself. That would give some explanation as to how they seem to be all-knowing and keep appearing to Hunter as the story progresses. I also love how they almost always start off each album. The only exception being Act 2, where they are introduced with their very own song. Casey has said that retroactively, the oracles sing the opening song in Act 1, Battissimo de Fuego. They are a little touch that gives the story such a unique vibe, and I have yet to find anything like it in any other media. It's a great storytelling device that lets us get exposition without it feeling forced. And with that, we have the end of Regress. Again, this song is just about perfect. The full orchestration is back and better than ever, and the harmonies used in this song are just hauntingly beautiful. This was actually the opening song that the band played on the tour, and getting to hear them perform this live was like a near spiritual experience for me. It is made even better by the fact that it flows directly into the next song, which may just be the best the Deer Hunter has ever written. Track 2, The Moon/Awake. I think I've said in every single one of these videos that the Deer Hunter always nails the second track on their albums. That is a major understatement when it comes to this song. This song is absolute perfection and it sets up the album so well. It starts with this disorienting feedback noise and a sick bass riff that just sounds so sinister. We can assume that we are in the opium-addled mind of Hunter when this song starts. After a second, we get the lead guitar with a haunting melody that lets us know that this album is going to be a little darker. We are in the deep end now, and Hunter's fate is not looking good. They played this song on the tour right after Regress, and I loved it so much. I was screaming the entire time, and my voice was just absolutely gone by the end of the concert. I can safely say that with the exception of the one unreleased song they played there, I knew and sang the lyrics to every single song they played. Like I mentioned before, Hunter is now hooked on opium. This song takes place in an opium den where he is in the throes of a bad trip. Opium dens were places where opium was sold and smoked. It wasn't illegal in most places back in the day, but it was definitely frowned upon. I can't imagine the mayor of the city being hooked on opium is a good look, but the people of the town must chalk it up to his PTSD. Hunter has made some awful decisions, but he has been through a terrible life and was honestly dealt a pretty terrible hand. It's hard not to feel bad for him. This soul's a stowaway. A stowaway is someone who sneaks onto a ship in order to get a free ride. Hunter feels that this soul is a stowaway in his life now that he has stolen the identity of the sun. He is now truly someone who believes that he was meant to die in the war and that the sun was meant to return. This thought consumes him. This line also gives us the image that Hunter is back to being a passenger in his own life. He feels like he is along for the ride and has no agency or direction. He is merely at the whims of the pimp and the priest and has no meaning in his life now that everyone he loves is gone. At the heels of a gaze, their eyes betrayed in the arcade. It wouldn't be a Deer Hunter song without some insanely cryptic nonsense like this. It's all good though, it lets me kind of flex my analysis muscles at the start, and it makes me kind of have a good warm-up before I get to the rest of the album. Writing these scripts is always a lengthy process, so starting out with something a little bit more weird like this is awesome. My thought is that this line refers to Hunter's current arrangement with the pimp and the priest. He is now essentially bowing down to him. In that way, he is at his heels. The betrayal in the arcade calls back to the pimp and the priest's confrontation with Hunter in the Act 4 during the final song, Ouroboros. This could also be a reference to Hunter and the sun. Hunter feels that he betrayed the sun by leaving him to die. We never really know for sure whether Hunter could have saved the sun. My thought is that he really couldn't have, but Hunter still feels this guilt anyways. Misdirection pervades and my image fades of you. I believe this line to be talking about Hunter using opium to forget his worries. The opium is the misdirection, and as he gets higher and higher, his image of the bad things that he has done and the spirits that haunt him fade. Another interpretation that seems equally valid is that the image Hunter is seeing is that of his mother, Miss Therese. He's trying to find guidance from her, as she was always his moral compass when he was growing up. The more he lies to others and helps the pimp and the priest, the more his image of his mother fades in his head. Where are you? This could be Hunter asking where the image of his mother went. It could also be his disorientation now that he is using opium. This is very similar to how he described his feeling in the Act 4 song, Is There Anybody Here? It could also be Hunter simply questioning where he is at in his life and how he came to fall so far. Could we return to the hymn of the lake? The lake is where Hunter grew up. This line is essentially a fourth wall break where Hunter wants to be back where he was in Act 1. A hymn is a religious song that is sung in church. Hunter feels that he never got closer to God than when he was living away from the city under the care of his mother. Grave refrains of impossible love, not believing what they'd say, haunting heralds whose words were lost on you. These lines reference the oracles again. It seems that Hunter now wants their advice again, but acknowledges that he never believed what they said to him in the first place. Their advice was always lost on him. He also calls the love they talked about impossible. This love was his relationship with Miss Leading. Hunter has gone back and forth about what he thinks of that fling. He felt betrayed by her and left, but then realized that he loved her as soon as the war started. He then found her again in the city, but couldn't approach her in fear of giving away his true identity. This love that he sees as impossible is something that he has done to himself. He could have been more understanding and they could have worked things out. If he hadn't been living a double life, he could have returned home and started a relationship with her. His own decisions have led to this predicament. That is a running theme that we'll see throughout this entire album. Hunter's own decisions and his own actions are what has damned him to this moment now. I'd bear you my heart if I knew that it still was there. Now it seems that Hunter is singing to a couple different people. The first is us, the listener. He is saying that he would give us a look as to how he truly feels and as a person deep down, but he doesn't know if that person still exists. He feels heartless. I think this also calls back to Miss Leading. Hunter would gladly surrender himself to her and try to rekindle their love, but he doesn't know if he can even feel love anymore. He has gone so far in the opposite direction and is now propping up the man that used her at the time, that terrible pimp and the priest. I'm too nervous to look, too afraid to close the book. Hunter is too nervous to look at the life that he has created. He knows that he is truly on a path towards his own destruction and does not want to see what lies before him. Maybe this is why he rejected the advice from the oracles. He doesn't want to see any more of his sad life. In the same way, he is also too afraid to fully reject the guidance. His life is like a train wreck that he can't keep himself from looking at. You and me both, buddy. Also, I think this might be a meta reference to Casey and the band being afraid to finish the acts and move on to something new. This series of albums was a project that spanned over a decade, probably just about a decade. I can't imagine that letting that go would have been something pleasant. It probably would have been really terrifying. Luckily, the Deer Hunter continues to make amazing music with kind of a different sound now. Their latest album, Antimai, is an absolute treasure, and I cannot wait for its follow-up. It is seriously such a worthy follow-up to the acts, and just absolutely amazing. They played Ring 5 at the concert as well, and it was probably my favorite song they did live. It was just incredible. So go listen to that if you haven't, because it's seriously so good. So take all the wind from my lungs if you're out of air. Hunter is now fully willing to give himself to the city and those around him. He feels that he could be some use if he is wholly used up in his pursuits to lift up others. This is a sentiment that is echoed in a really great song by the Oh Hellos called Boreas. I would give that a listen if you want some insight into this particular point of view. This viewpoint is one that is often seen in those who are considering ending their own lives. I personally have been in some really dark places before and have felt that I would prefer to be wholly used up in order to help those around me rather than just take care of myself. This is a tricky thought process though, because while it might seem noble, the reality is that you will always do more and help more by simply existing. If you are gone, those people that you want to lift up will be devastated. There is no way to be used up in service of others. You have to be there to help them. You have to be there in person. Just deliver me truth, deliver me you. Going forward from the last line, Hunter hopes that if he dies, he will be able to find some truth in the next life and be reunited with his mother. That's the only thing he truly wants. Again, in his high, he is potentially seeing the spirit of Mystery and is singing this to her. Perhaps him wishing for her to take the wind from his lungs, it is a desire to switch spots with her. Maybe he feels that she is more deserving of life than he is at the moment. The irony is that Misleading tragically felt that she was also undeserving of life, as she ended up taking her own life at the beginning of Act 2. How do we lose our place? Who decided our fate? Decay until we're erased, idly wasting away. Hunter questions how he got to this place, and the reality is that he brought himself here. He was the one who made his decisions, and every attempt that he has made to cheat fate has brought him closer and closer to this low point. He now feels that he is determined to waste away as nothing more than a pawn for the city. He has fully given up his hopes of transforming the city and himself into something more. This is interesting because the only thing he really risks by defying the pimp and the priest is being revealed as a fraud. The city would probably not like that revelation, and he would surely be kicked out of his position as mayor and shunned. But would that be the worst thing? He could then go on to being himself and living back at the lake. Maybe he could even get back together with Misleading. Hunter's life isn't over yet, but he thinks it might as well be. Well, the nightmare is ending soon. Hunter knows that the end of his life is coming soon. He now just wants to wait out until that happens. Again, he is resigned to being a passenger in his life and refuses to take accountability for his actions and do something to make things right. Hope isn't lost for him, however. Who are you waiting for? I yelled this line so hard at the concert. It is such a great moment in the song. They use this cool synth in the back that gets me so hyped every time. This line is most likely a call from Mystery to Hunter. She is encouraging him to pick himself up and stop waiting for things to happen to him. Hunter doesn't seem to be listening though. Maybe he has gone too far in the opium. If the younger me just could have seen the trouble I'd create, he'd never have agreed to carry on. An interesting statement from Hunter that I don't know if I really believe. He was given ample warnings from the oracles that he failed to heed. Maybe he feels that this life was destined to turn out this way. Either way, Hunter clearly regrets the actions he has taken so far. When sins of sons to fathers come, too heavy is the weight. This line takes reference to a classic saying, that being, the boy is the father to the man. It is a phrase that means that the actions that someone takes when they are young will dictate how they turn out. They will be the product of decisions that were made when they hadn't fully developed. Hunter is now a victim to the decisions that he made during World War I. He killed his father and left the son to die. Now he is held captive to a stolen identity that he thought would provide him freedom. It has done the exact opposite. This is also a reference to Hunter killing his father. The sin that Hunter committed by murdering him led to the death of the father and the destruction of any family that Hunter had left. The father was a terrible man, but it's possible that Hunter's vigilante justice wasn't the best solution. The spirit split in two. In the Act 4 song, The Line, we had Hunter ditching his old life and fully becoming the sun. In that song, he essentially became a single spirit instead of carrying around the burden of both lives. Now, he knows that he must embrace himself, that he can't let that go. His spirit has split back into the duality of both Hunter and the sun. Dear Apparition, in this fleeting flash, must I burn the earth before you turn to ash? Okay, so this apparition that Hunter is seeing is kind of tricky. Some people say that it is mystery, but others say that it is Hunter seeing himself as a child. Either way, he is hallucinating from the opium and is questioning what he has to do now. My guess would be that he is seeing himself in this moment, as mystery is already long gone and could be said to have already turned to ash. Now Hunter looks at himself and wonders what he needs to do before he finally dies. This also calls back to the sins of sons to fathers line that we were talking about earlier. Would such extremes repair our broken past? So it seems that Hunter has a plan that involves burning the earth. This could be seen as Hunter going scorched earth on the pimp and the priest. That is a phrase that means essentially refusing to negotiate or play nice anymore, leaving nothing but scorched earth in the wake of the conflict. Hunter thinks that if he can truly take on the pimp and the priest and stop what he is doing with the church and the dime, he can find some meaning in his life. If he can stop this one great evil, maybe it will have made his life worth it in his eyes. The silver lining seldom lies in sight too plain to see. Hunter knows that there is a silver lining in his life, but he just can't see it. That would be his chance to find salvation and maybe save himself from ending up in hell after he dies. Although he knows that the silver lining is there, he can't quite see it yet. He knows he needs to do something, but he doesn't know what quite yet. But trust our story's end can bring redemption for the pain endured. And here we get a little bit of optimism for Hunter. He believes that with the end of his life, he will be able to find some redemption. It is also a clue to the listener that Hunter's story won't be for nothing. We will get some sort of resolution. The outro to this song is a choir of ghostly voices singing a kind of sinister melody. I imagine it to be the other people in the opium den, also maybe kind of the spirits around him. And call me crazy, but I swear this is an interpolation of the end of the Act 3 song, In Cauda Venenum, where Hunter sings about misleading. They have a similar sound to them, and it's just that this version is in like a more sinister minor key. But anyway, that does it for the Moon/Awake. I should probably mention that the moon is another tarot card that symbolizes illusion and deception. It also symbolizes hidden enemies. This could be a reference to Hunter's life so far, but it could also be a clue as to where the final chapter of the story is headed. This song is truly amazing, maybe the best that the Deer Hunter has ever made. It is such a fantastic way to start the album, and it gets me so hyped every time I hear it. The Deer Apparition section is truly breathtaking, and it comes back later again in this album. It's just a perfect song. Track 3, Cascade. Our next song is one that also has a bunch of cryptic lyrics that deal with Hunter's place in this life. These first couple of songs don't do much to move the plot forward, but are crucial to our understanding of who Hunter is and what he really wants. They show us how far he has fallen since the end of Act 4. I heard a call in my sleep again. I brought my body to the altar, but a good man said that I raised the dead. This seems to be describing a recurring dream that Hunter has. One where he goes to the church and gets ready to worship God, but is turned away because he raised the dead. This serves to fortify Hunter's thought that he is unable to obtain redemption due to the fact that he stole the son's soul. In that way, he raised the dead. The altar could be a reference to the sacrificial altar. Hunter brings himself to the altar to be sacrificed by a priest, a prophet, or God himself, but is rejected on the grounds that he isn't who he says he is. In the previous song, he wished to be used up to help those around him, but even this isn't possible as his entire life is a sham. I'm seeing forgotten forms from a different age, half-hearted truths hanging in the air with the Holy Ghost. These lines are interesting. It seems that Hunter's past life is coming back to haunt him. He can see the half-truths of his previous life. These truths are with the Holy Ghost, again, suggesting that if Hunter had been himself, he could have found redemption. These truths could also be the life of the Son. Maybe they are half-hearted because Hunter doesn't really know them or believe in them. Any conviction that he might express to others about the life of the Son is phony because he never lived that life. The Son has found redemption in the afterlife, but Hunter doesn't know if that's what waits for him. I'm singing Hymns with the Devil in Confessional. I think this is the only time that the name of the album is found inside the album itself, at least regarding the Deer Hunter's Act series. This line refers to Hunter going to the church to meet with the pimp and the priest. The two of them conspire together, and Hunter feels that he is using a holy place to do the work of the devil. Even though Hunter despises the pimp and the priest, he is the only one who truly knows who Hunter is. In that way, Hunter can confide in him about his life. Maybe he does this as this is the only way for him to truly be himself. My guess is that he wants to keep these secrets to himself, though, as he does not want to give the pimp and the priest any more ammo to use against him. There is also a possibility that the pimp and the priest is extorting more information from Hunter to hold against him. We know from a later song that he knows that Hunter left the Son to die. Maybe the pimp and the priest forced Hunter to tell him everything about his life in exchange for keeping the secret of his dual identity. I've been running through the night again, trying to find where the wild things wouldn't go. These lines are really tough for me. At first I thought this was Hunter running through the night and trying to find where the pimp and the priest have re-established the dime, but I think that the dime is back at its old location, so that wouldn't really make any sense. It could also be that this is a metaphor for Hunter trying to come up with a way to stop the pimp and the priest without giving himself up. He wants to expose him, but isn't ready to give up his role as the mayor and ends up keeping that information to himself, as expressed in the next line. But I'm keeping it in, hate the sinner, never hate the sin. That second line is from a popular Christian saying that goes, don't hate the sinner, hate the sin. It is a call to not judge others for their mistakes, but rather point your judgment to the idea of that sin's existence, recognizing that anyone can fall into temptation. Hunter's thoughts are the inverse of that. He forces himself to be okay with the terrible things that the pimp and the priest does, and reserves his hate for the sinner himself. He still hates that man with everything that he has. It could also be that Hunter hates himself, but can rationalize his sin of keeping his identity a secret. I keep waking in the strangest states and drawing lines around my body to recall my place. I feel the heat of 1,000 breaths upon my neck. This feels like a callback to Is There Anybody Here, where Hunter claimed that he was waking in the afternoon. Now he again feels that everything about his life is wrong. I'm sure this is also a side effect of the opium that he is constantly using. To draw lines around one's body to recall its place reminds me of the classic image of the white chalk outline of a dead body at a crime scene. As Hunter grows more paranoid, he continues to remind himself of how he left the Son to die and is essentially a dead man walking. The heat of 1,000 breaths is the pressure that he feels as the mayor. Despite his prolonged existential crisis, Hunter is still the mayor and needs to get to work. He feels the people of the city breathing down his neck as all of his actions are looked at and judged. And the gaze of 1,000 eyes burning holes into my back, and now I'm stuck between alive and after. Again, Hunter feels judged by the people of the city. He wished he could live an isolated life back at the lake, but instead he is constantly surrounded and watched. This paranoia has caused him to return back to his feeling that he is caught between life and death. I've been searching for a remedy, hands to guide where the shadows never show, I'll never know. It seems that Hunter is looking for more guidance. Perhaps he wishes that the oracles would come back and help him out. Now he is finally ready to listen to their advice. Unfortunately for him, their departure was final and he will not get any guidance. He also feels that he lives in the shadow and needs a figure from the light to guide him through this life. He can't find a light in the darkness because he is the darkness, and he doesn't have access to anyone that can pull him out of this hellish state. I keep looking for a quicker fix, but I'm afraid of finding what it is. I know that I just need a quicker fix. This fix is referencing two things. The first and most obvious is Hunter's opium addiction. While it may seem obvious given that I've talked about it extensively, this is actually the first tangible clue that we get that shows he is struggling with some sort of addiction. He is afraid of moving on to what the next drug is. He's worried that he'll get into something too intense and end up too far gone. The quicker fix is also a reference to his desire to fix his life. He needs to do something to get him back on track immediately. He can't wait out the pimp and the priest anymore, and fears that he is headed for hell if he can't redeem himself. I keep looking for a quicker fix, but I wouldn't know just what to do with it. Even if Hunter does find this solution to his troubles, he doesn't know if he is in any state to actually go through with it. He is worried that he is both beyond saving and too apathetic to take any more meaningful action in his own destiny. And that is the end of Cascade. This is one of those songs that I didn't love at first, but has really grown on me over time. It has a very unique sound to it and uses a really bizarre instrument at the beginning that makes you feel like you're in the same disoriented state that Hunter is in. Track 4, The Most Cursed of Hands / Who Am I? After the first 3 songs that focus exclusively on Hunter's life, we get a song from the perspective of the pimp and the priest next. This song acts as a sermon that the priest gives to his congregation. It uses a small portion of the melody that is found at the end of the Act 4 song, King of Swords, reversed. This song also originally comes from a short story that Casey wrote, which was unconnected to the story of the acts. The story fits so well into the tale of Hunter and the pimp of the priest that it just makes sense to throw it in here. It is a parable for how Hunter was tricked in Act 4. The devil went down to the river. The river is an important location in the acts that can stand for either salvation or destruction. The river is also a place where one could be baptized. The devil wouldn't be caught dead at a baptism, however, and this line actually refers to something completely different. The term river card is used to refer to the final card that you are dealt during poker or Texas Hold'em before you are allowed to bid. This sets the stage of the story taking place at a poker table. The devil is holding out hope for a winning hand with the last card that he is dealt. And he came to fall, to lose it all, to fool the fool, too quick to call. Here we get a glimpse of the plan that the devil has. He wants to lose this hand. He has some sort of trick up his sleeve to fool the other gambler that involves him losing the game of poker. This is a callback to the pimp and the priest in Act 4. The pimp and the priest allowed Hunter to gain power and shut the dime down. He let him think he was safe, and then he struck and held his knowledge over him. In this story, the devil symbolizes the pimp and the priest, and the gambler is Hunter. Hunter was too quick to call. He was eager to destroy the pimp and the priest, and it led to him thinking that he was safe. The reality was that Hunter took too much by going after him, and that is what led to his downfall. While the gambler's stacks grew bigger, he had lost his sights through narrowed eyes, too tempted by his wry desires. Again, this mirrors Hunter. As he accumulated more and more power, he got sloppy. He lost sight of who he was and convinced himself that he had tricked the pimp and the priest. It was this hubris that he is now currently paying for as the opium-addicted mayor puppet of his greatest enemy. Damned across faded paths, the time to fold had come to pass. The pimp and the priest were fated to face off against one another. Hunter is the son of one of the ladies of the dime. He was created by the terrible machine that the pimp and the priest orchestrated. Now that Hunter is grown, he must take on this terrible man to redeem his mother. Like I said earlier, Hunter overplayed his hand when it may have been better to fold and give up. This is also an echo of what Miss Leading said on the Act 2 song, Where the Road Parts. She said that Hunter was the only one who didn't fold. This was a clue way back then that Hunter may be made of sterner stuff. Maybe he does have what it takes to win this war for the soul of the city. In the poker game of the parable, the gambler recognizes that the devil should have folded, and he now sees his opportunity to take everything he can from him, similar to how Hunter was led to believe that he had tricked the pimp and the priest. With the gambler's glory delivered, the gambler knows he has a winning hand and is ready to start increasing his bid in order to clean out the devil. This line also calls back to the Act 4 song, King of Swords Reversed, where we get the line, "You have a hard time, bring yourself to glory," in relation to Hunter. It was his desire to bring glory to himself that damned him in the end. He had thirst for more, a bigger score, a trophy no one could ignore. Again, this is a reference to Hunter shutting down the dime. Those were his spoils of war as discussed back in the Act 4 video. It was most likely this action that caused the pimp and the priest to finally strike back. And the devil's wealth had withered, so with cunning class he offered fast his soul. The wager had been cast. Now that the devil has nothing left to bid with, he decided to offer his own soul hidden inside a flask. While it may seem like a desperate situation for the devil, he does so with cunning class, suggesting that he is still remaining calm. The gambler called, the river fell, and now the hand from out of hell. The two players show their hands, river cards and all. The gambler can see that he has the winning hand, the hand from out of hell. The hand from hell could also be a reference to the devil's truly awful hand. Maybe the gambler is confused as to why the devil continued to raise the stakes when his hand was so poor. The devil smiled, looked in his eyes. He knew the loss was glorified. It seems that the devil planned to lose all along. This echoes the final confrontation of Act 4, where the pimp and the priest reveals that he let Hunter bully him around for so long. It was all part of his plan. Hunter was never truly in charge. The devil said, "Revel in your victory. You've earned your damning, pack your things and leave." The devil is ecstatic to be free of his own soul. He was looking to offload it for some time. Just like the pimp and the priest, he let the gambler win everything so he himself could gain even more power, although the goals of these two people are a little different. But the gambler only stood and stuttered, stammering on words in disbelief. The gambler is confused as to the devil's excitement, similar to how Hunter fell down and fell apart during the final song of Act 4, Ouroboros. "Now you've won a new vocation, pray to me that you can stand the heat." This was the true intention of the devil all along. By giving up his soul to the gambler, he passed his job of being the devil over to him as well. The gambler is now the new devil, which must not be a great job. To stand the heat is a reference to the gambler being able to perform his new duties as the devil, but also having to withstand the literal fires of hell, his new home. And that, the gambler saw, meant he had gone and finally set the devil free. This game of poker set the devil free from his eternal torment. In the same way, the gambit that the pimp and the priest used on Hunter allowed him to continue on with his scam at the church and the dime. Hunter's determination to lock him up really just set him free. Damned across fated paths, the hand he played would be his last. This could be a line referring to the gambler giving up the game of poker now that he has lost everything. It could also be that the devil will no longer play now that he has finally achieved his goals. This could also be the pimp and the priest stating that Hunter has learned his place and will no longer try to mess with him. This isn't true, however, as we will see later. It could also be a line from Hunter who insists in this moment that the pimp and the priest will finally be brought to justice. The next portion of the song is from Hunter's perspective as he sings once again about where he is at in his life. He may be at the church listening to the sermon. That would be a good way to keep up appearances and also keep the pimp and the priest in his sights. Who am I? Who am I? Just a gambler holding aces in the devil's eyes? As Hunter listens to this sermon, he realizes that the pimp and the priest is preaching about him. He knows that he was the gambler all along, and his winning hand was merely orchestrated by the pimp and the priest, or the devil in this case. What is wrong? What's the sin? Where's the answer? Where the hell do I fit in? Hunter tries to understand what he did so wrong. In his eyes, he just tried to help the city. He feels that he is being punished for trying to stop the evil around him, and doesn't understand where justice is in his situation. This could also be a call from the confused congregation, as the sermon really doesn't sound like it fits in a church. They don't understand where they fit into the story because they don't. It's simply a sermon for Hunter and the pimp and the priest. Or could it be there's just a little demon lost in the debris? Hunter thinks that the destruction of his life may have uncovered his true self, a demon. This line could also be a reference that Hunter thinks that the pimp and the priest isn't all he's cracked up to be. Maybe he's just a small demon instead of the devil himself. And I should idly bide my time until a wager releases me? Maybe Hunter can just wait around for someone else to take on the pimp and the priest. Maybe he should just do his bidding until he finally lets him go. In any case, Hunter is still confused as to what to do in this situation. Hey, it can't remain unknown. Hunter knows that the secret of his double life can't stay buried forever, and starts to plan for what will happen when he is finally revealed. He also knows that the secret of what he is to do with the pimp and the priest will be revealed to him soon if he is patient. We also get the unfinished melody that was used at the very end of Act 4. I think this is to symbolize that we now have all of the pieces of that album established in this one. Whereas the melody was overbearing and menacing before, now it is calm and collected. Maybe Hunter is finally collecting himself after being so distraught. He is ready to fight again. This song is really great, and it is crazy that it wasn't ever meant to go into the acts because it fits so perfectly. This is one of those songs that really stood out to me the first time that I heard it, and has a couple great musical callbacks, including one to He Said He Had a Story off of Act 3. It's just such a fantastic song overall. Track 5, The Revival. Our next song is a very upbeat sounding tune that is fitting for the subject matter, the reopening of the dime. The pimp and the priest, emboldened by his iron grip on Hunter, is now getting the dime back up and running better than ever. No doubt he has made quite a lot of money from his extortion of Hunter. It took a little longer than we hoped, but it was worth it. This line is interesting because there seems to be some reason that the pimp and the priest was unable to get the dime back up and running since it had been closed at the end of Act 4. My guess is that the pimp and the priest was doing renovations on the building, or perhaps he needed to regain his supply of women to work for him. The reopening of the dime is a crucial moment in Hunter's life. It is the moment that everything he planned to do comes crashing down. He sacrificed so much to shut it down the first time. He lied and cheated his way to the top, and now it seems that it was all for nothing. You know, it takes a village to raise a scheme to patch the holes in the mausoleum. The first part of the line comes from the saying, "It takes a village to raise a child," meaning that the growth of a child is determined by all those around him and not solely his parents. Here we see that the pimp and the priest scheme is one that relies on the entire town. He needed to get the woman back and let the men know that the dime was ready to go. His phrasing of calling the dime a mausoleum is interesting. It seems that he is fully aware of his terrible actions and sees the dime as a place of death. Drawing connection to the death makes it easier for him to sell a resurrection of sorts at the church. Well, we're packing in the patronage like it's a lotto, and everybody wins. Now take a seat so the show can start, and will you welcome these works of art? Here we see that the dime is more popular than ever. They barely have room for all the men that want to get in on the action. His insistence that everybody wins conveniently leaves out the woman that will be taken advantage of that night. He then starts to show off the ladies of the dime to the eager crowd of men. Isn't she beautiful? No? Maybe another one here could entertain. Yes, we swear that every minute's worth the wait. These lines are pretty self-explanatory, but it's worth noting that this song was one of the 3 singles the band released before the album fully came out. This means it's essentially a fourth wall break, telling the listener that the wait from Act 4 to 5 was worth the wait. They were 100% correct with that statement. Hey, it's a cry you can't contain, a release you couldn't estimate. Initially, this reads like the pimp and the priest describing the pleasure that the men will experience with the ladies of the dime. We know that the women have a habit of crying out in agony during the night, so this is a little bit of dramatic irony in that sense. This could also be a subtle jab at Hunter. He wishes he could release his true self and give up his stolen identity, but now he has to keep his identity secret in order to keep his standing with the town. Hunter would also love to expose the pimp and the priest to the rest of the city, but he knows that he must contain himself. The specific wording of being a cry you can't contain is also a nod to the Act 4 song Ouroboros. In that song, it's said that Hunter cried out to the crooked heart of the pimp and the priest. While he was able to confront him back then, Hunter is unable to do so now and must contain his cry. And the secret's safe as long as you pay, it's so good to be so bad. The first line is another doublespeak from the pimp and the priest. The secret of the men who sin with the ladies of the dime is safe as long as they pay the pimp and then pay the priest later to be forgiven of those sins. The experience of doing a bad thing brings them pleasure as well, hence the second line. It's also another call out to Hunter. The pimp and the priest is telling him that he will continue to keep his secret, but only if he continues to fund the operation of the dime. He seems to really love rubbing all of this in. You can leave it when you walk away and pretend you've washed your hands of it. The men can pretend like they aren't bothered by their actions, but the stain will still live on inside of them. They can only pretend to be clean. This also might be a callback to the idea of the woman and the men of the dime having red hands, as discussed back in Act 2. Last call for the Sunday squaws, and there's no room left for hem and haw. These are lyrics that literally only the deer hunter could write. Such a fun use of words to describe a seedy brothel. The term squaw is one that refers to a group of Native Americans, but was also used as a sexual slur back in the day. This is one of those rare occasions where it is fitting to use a term like this. It is to show us that the pimp and the priest isn't simply a cunning villain, he's also a vulgar, terrible man who deserves to be taken down. We can root for Hunter even more now. To hem and haw is to be indecisive about something. The pimp and the priest is saying that the men there need to make up their minds about sleeping with the ladies or get out. There is simply no room for anyone who hasn't made their mind up. It's also another Native American term, so we have some cool marrying there. We'll give a gift long overdue and make a sultan out of you. The pimp and the priest wants the men of the dime to feel like rulers and kings. He wants them to take advantage of the woman, and it shows just how misogynistic this whole act is. The power dynamic of what goes on in the dime is explored more in the Act 3 song, He Said He Had a Story. It seems that these men revel in making the ladies suffer. That's right, yeah, any troglodyte can have a life in the party as a socialite. A troglodyte is a caveman. It is essentially a primitive human. We can learn from this that the dime attracts the lowest common denominator of men, those who have no social standing. They can feel like they are suave and cunning by paying for their night with the ladies. This is also another example of just such great wording from the band. I always say that the Deer Hunter is the only band that could get away with using the word troglodyte in a song without it feeling super forced or out of place. It's just so awesome, I love it. Or, if you're looking to efface, you can retire without a trace. This line is directed to those men of the dime that may not be proud of their actions. Maybe they don't want to talk to the ladies and enjoy the party of the nightlife. They simply want to sink into the shadows with a lady and get the night over with, not being seen by anyone who could recognize them. Don't you bother with doubt. This line is really funny to me. This should just be the pimp's motto, telling the men to turn off that moral compass and get on with the night. They can surely be forgiven of their sins for a price. It also calls back to some lines in the Act 2 song, Evicted. There was a line sung by Misleading that went, "Wash your mouth out, ditch those morals." I always read that line as one that was repeated to her by the pimp and the priest. He also tells the ladies to not doubt their actions and to abandon any moral compass that they might have. Another candidate for giving her bruises, another night that she'll dissociate, another man who thinks the rules don't apply to him. Here we see the pimp and the priest reveling in how rough the men are with the woman. They beat and harm the ladies of the dime while they are left to dissociate and be spared some of the mental trauma from being treated so terribly. These men think that the rules of basic human decency don't apply to them. Again, this is explored more in He Said He Had a Story. Long was this road I've wandered, but short did my temperance live. This next section is sung by Hunter. He is saying that the road that he took through life was a long one. He experienced so much before he made it to this point. Temperance is another word for self-restraint. Hunter is saying that he has done so many things in his life, but has always lacked restraint. Here, I've helped him build a temple to deify this czar of sin. Hunter is reflecting on how it was through his wealth and power that led to the reorganizing of the dime. This all truly would not have been possible without his help, and the pimp and the priest seems eager to constantly remind Hunter of that fact. Now who to blame but I for tying these knots so well at my wrists? Hunter can see that it was himself that put him in his current predicament. Say what you will about the guy, but he does seem to be doing a whole lot better at owning up to his own mistakes. Now he feels that he is bound by his own foolish ideals and aspirations. The noose would surely find me if I'm too wily, but what of the life I'd live? Hunter believes that if he were to rebel against the pimp and the priest, it would surely end in his own death. The opposition is too powerful, and he has an army of sadistic men to contend with as well. On the other hand, Hunter isn't living much of a life at all, and is starting to feel that he has nothing left to lose. The sail of a soul that falls, as foolish as young Esau. The story of Jacob and Esau is one found in the Old Testament in the Bible. They were brothers who were the sons of a wealthy man. They each had large inheritances that would be passed down to them after their father passed away. One day, after Esau was working in the fields, he came home starving. He saw that Jacob had made some soup, and he said he would be willing to give him anything to have some. Jacob said that he could have the soup if he sold his birthright to him. Esau, being too blinded by his hunger, sold the birthright to Jacob but didn't think much of it. Years later, the father was blind and close to death. The father hadn't agreed to withhold his blessing and birthright from Esau, as he found it silly to think that his son would trade it away for something so small. But Jacob impersonated Esau and successfully stole the birthright from him with the blessing of the blind father. There are some pretty obvious parallels to the story of Hunter. He is impersonating his brother to steal fame and glory. He could also have been said to have sold his soul to the pimp and the priest for something as insignificant as being the mayor of one of the hundreds of thousands of cities on the planet. It's better if I withdraw. This line is deceptively important. It's a short one, but it shows that Hunter is now going to stay out of the limelight for a while. It is now that he decides to abandon his lavish home in the city and move back to his home, the lake, where he grew up. Although he doesn't fully move there, he just starts visiting there for a reason we're going to get to in the next song. He is still the mayor and must have to still travel to the city every day or live there partially, but he wants to be somewhere that he can think for himself and not feel that he is constantly watched by those around him. It is similar to how Miss Therese fled the dime to start her home at the lake in the Act 1 song, City Escape. Hunter's decision to step back is one that ends up being quite good for him. That is reflected on the calming instrumental section that leads us into our next song. Overall, this song is really great. It's bombastic and incredibly fitting for The Pimp and the Priest. It is one of those songs that has a lot going on under the surface. I figure this would be an easy one to cover since it's pretty obvious what is happening in the story, but there ended up being a ton of interesting double meanings and parallels that I never picked up on before. Just a cool song. Track 6, Melpomene. This next song takes a markedly different tone than what we have seen so far on the album. It is a song that is essentially a love letter between Hunter and Misleading. That's right, Hunter has gotten back together with Misleading, but is most likely not going out with her in public given her reputation in the city. I always envisioned that Misleading is living back at the lake while Hunter works in the city. Now that he has decided to move back to the lake and withdraw from the chaos of the world around him, he can be with Misleading even more. This song is all about how Hunter feels about her and their relationship. Melpomene is a name from Greek mythology. She was the muse of tragedy. If you don't know, muses were mythical women who essentially invented music, and different musicians would worship or learn from different muses depending on the kind of music they wanted to make. It would make sense that Misleading would act as Hunter's muse given his tragic life. Cold had I calloused. Hunter lost his ability to feel love after his experiences with Misleading in Act 2. He felt for so long that he wasn't meant to be in love with anyone and that he was better off alone. He was unable to find meaning in his relationship with the fiancé and had assumed that he was never meant to find love in this life. This line is also a slight callback to the Act 3 song, This Beautiful Life, that has the lyrics, this cold calloused heart sitting still in this cave of a chest. Just a cool little callback there. Walls were raised to bear the weight I'd not take. This is a reference to the emotional walls that Hunter put up after Act 2. It was these walls that allowed him to kill his father and become the Sun. He saw these walls as a form of protection when they were really what led him to his demise. He now realizes that the weight of his shame and embarrassment from Misleading was something he could have worked through on his own. Too slow were my senses, muted musings lost their way, disconnected. Again, we have Hunter talking about how he should have listened to the oracles. He was too slow to heed their advice, and that is what has led him to ruin. Remember that in the Act 2 song, The Oracles on the Delphi Express, the oracle said, "Don't be ashamed of your amour faux pas." They told him to stick things out with Misleading, but he was too blinded to understand that at the time. This could also maybe be a reference to when Hunter saw Misleading in the Act 4 song, A Night on the Town. He was too slow to approach her, and that led him to meeting the fiancé and becoming mayor. Maybe if he had reintroduced himself then, things would have turned out differently. Only silence remained, holding my breath in the dark. This is yet another reference to the idea of love being almost like drowning that we have talked about in pretty much every single one of these videos. It is to show that Hunter was left in the dark after the oracles left, and he has been looking for guidance ever since. Gasping for air with the lungs of a lark. A lark is a small bird that is both fragile and can also imitate other birds. Hunter is like a lark because he can see that he is a fragile person deep down, and also he is mimicking the sun. This could also be a callback to the Moon/Awake, when he encouraged others to take all the wind from his lungs. He's now realizing that he was left to gasp and sputter for air, that he had no wind left to give. So warm was your welcome, humble in its embrace. From this line, we can see that Misleading was kind to Hunter when he finally revealed himself to her. She was the first one he could be himself around since taking on the identity of the sun. I like the idea that she wasn't judgmental of him and was just happy to see him after all these years. It makes the relationship seem somewhat wholesome. The word embrace is also used to call back to the Bittersweet 3, Embrace. That was the song that detailed Hunter and Misleading's first night together. Back then, it was a dramatic and momentous affair for Hunter. Now their embrace is something humble, which is good for the two of them. Tell me, just how did you save me? Pull me up from the grave. Hunter being able to be himself around Misleading must have felt like he was being brought back to life. He had previously metaphorically killed and buried his old life, and now he can stop pretending and be himself around someone that cares for him. The irony being that if he had just done that in the first place, he'd be in a much better spot now. Though my youth did mislead, I would retreat to you, right back to your arms with my spirit aglow. Again, Hunter feels that he has made so many wrong decisions throughout the course of his life. He must have felt great having someone who didn't judge him for those choices. Misleading has made her fair share of mistakes as well, and the two of them make a good pair since they share that mutual understanding now. We can also see that this romance makes Hunter feel alive. The entire beginning of the album was all about how Hunter felt dead and misplaced in this world. Now, back with the love of his life, he can finally feel that he is with somebody and he has something to live for. Where the pains of the past exit en masse through you. Hunter feels that his relationship with Misleading is curing the wounds inside of him. This is similar to what he wished for in the Act 3 song, This Beautiful Life, where he said that he wished he could forget the words to the songs that we've heard, the passages read, all the names in the world that have brought us this pain. His desire to forget all of that pain is being fulfilled through Misleading. Too lost when we part, with the lungs of a lark. A slight variation on the previous line, but it's just another way to show that Hunter feels lost without Misleading. They must spend the nights together at the lake only for Hunter to make his way back to the city every morning. This mirrors how Mystery would spend the days with Hunter while he was growing up, only to travel to the city each night to work at the dime. I, far removed from myself, had denied what I lost when my heart had withdrawn to the fray. This is a reference to Hunter fleeing the city at the end of Act 2 to join the army. He withdrew his broken heart and told himself that he was doing the right thing by fighting in World War I. He couldn't acknowledge that he was simply running away because he was scared of the feelings that he had for Misleading. In a whimsical way, I would flee from the truth I could bury in youth. Hunter burying in youth is most likely a reference to him assuming the son's identity and going to live with the mother. He chose to recreate his life that he lived while he was young. Him stealing the identity was also him fleeing from the truth of who he really was in order to avoid the pain of having to sort out his own inner demons. You would have me if I'd fallen again. Would you bring me back out of the dark with my lungs of a lark? Again, we can see that Hunter and Misleading find common ground in their shared tendency to not make the best decisions. Each of them falls only to be picked back up by the other. Now, this total dependency on someone else isn't great, but it's probably the best relationship that Hunter has had so far. This also calls back to the Act 2 song, Where the Road Parts, which starts with Misleading saying, "It's ironic how I'd fall just to get back up again." We can see that she is no stranger to falling down herself and thus can help Hunter get back up when he is down. And that is it for this song. It's really beautiful and a nice break from some of the more intense stuff. It's also really nice just to have a solid love song after so many albums of singing about heartbreak and pain. It's quite wholesome to see Hunter accept himself for who he is and be able to look past all the flaws that kept him from being with Misleading. The end of this song is the sound of footsteps before it sounds like we enter a crowded room where people are laughing and music is playing. It is then that we get what may be the most controversial analysis that I will make in any of these videos. Track 7, Mr. Usher on his way to town. Okay, so here is where things get really tricky. This song is amazing and I love it, but I also have a pretty strong headcanon for what this song is about that contradicts a lot of what has been said and confirmed about this story. I know that getting into wacky theories can be dangerous, but I think that my interpretation makes the entire story as a whole a lot cleaner. This song introduces a new character, Mr. Usher. He is a suave guy who comes in to essentially usher in the end of the story. Now, if we were going to get an Act 6, then I wouldn't mind this introduction because the character could be explored later on. But if Act 5 is where the story ends, then introducing a new character who really doesn't do a whole ton of stuff just feels off. It is because of this that I'm going to do my analysis of this album using my own personal theory, that being, Mr. Usher isn't real. He is a myth made up by the Pimp and the Priest to scare people into staying in line and not crossing him. This song is either a sermon to the church, or a story that he's telling to the men of the dime, or most likely both. Again, this goes against what is widely accepted and what has been confirmed, and I know that it might be disappointing for me to use my own theory here, but it's my video and I think this interpretation just gives us a much more satisfying ending. There are posts online that detail the story as it is widely accepted, but this video is going to be my own personal interpretation, so again, it's a little bit weird, it's a little bit different than what you might be expecting, but if you want to know how most people look at it, then you can read those posts online. This is just my video, my interpretation, and I'm going to do what I want. So anyway, enough preamble, let's get into it. The shutters close when he's around. The children shut their eyes in fear of what they must surmise when all the gentlemen hang their heads down, down, down. Here we have the Pimp and the Priest warning the people of the city against a scary new figure that will soon be visiting the city. He is someone who people avert their eyes from and intentionally avoid. This gives credence to the fact that no one has ever really seen Mr. Usher since he doesn't actually exist. Yeah, Mr. Usher's on his way to town. The Pimp and the Priest specifies that while Mr. Usher isn't there yet, he will soon be there. I believe he's doing this because he can sense that Hunter is growing tired of being complicit in his schemes. If the Pimp and the Priest were ever to kill Hunter or take drastic action, he wants there to be some sort of alibi. If Hunter winds up dead, people might put the pieces together and know that the Pimp and the Priest killed him. They spend a lot of time together after all. Hunter is at church on Sunday and even seems to make appearances at the dime. The Pimp and the Priest concocts a mystical character who is ruthless and cunning, someone who would kill Hunter without a second thought. He keeps his sights set straight and true, his idle hands won't flitter flutter, never does he slip or stutter. The phrase straight and true is one that is taken from my favorite Act 3 song, Go Get Your Gun. There, when talking about fighting in the war, the soldiers were advised to aim their guns straight and true. This reference seeks to reinforce Mr. Usher's own killer motives. He is also presented as something more than human. He is exacting and cool under pressure. He never makes mistakes and he never slips up. Again, this is just a myth made up by the Pimp and the Priest. He literally saw Hunter live a double life and was like, okay, I'm gonna make one myself and just do a triple life now. Still, his mind is menacing away. Yeah, Mr. Usher's on the prowl today. This song also serves for the Pimp and the Priest to stroke his own ego. He seems to think very highly of himself, and this reflects how he talks about the mythical Mr. Usher. He also tells the city that Mr. Usher is no longer on his way to town, but he is currently on the prowl. Again, all of this just serves the Pimp and the Priest to fearmonger. He needn't dirty up his hands, he'll twist your heart until you're manic, lost in endless streams of panic. This shows that Mr. Usher isn't simply a physical threat, but an emotional one as well. He's able to twist the hearts and minds of those he meets without laying a finger on them. This is reminiscent of how the Pimp and the Priest continues to take little jabs at Hunter while he sings about the church and the dime, just like we saw on The Revival. Pray you're not the one he finds if Mr. Usher's got you on his mind. The idea for praying for protection is something that would be said by the priest at the church. Perhaps he is now offering to provide spiritual protection for the members of his congregation for a healthy sum of money. Just another way for him to add to his riches by scamming the people of the city. Anytime the plan will get a bit off track, he's the only one who can bring it back. The main manipulator, yeah, the wolf who leads the pack. These lines sound like they are being sung about the Pimp and the Priest. He is the main manipulator of the story, and he's now psyching himself up to start taking some drastic measures in the story. Those are the actions that he needs to take to keep his plan on track. He can't risk losing everything that he has built so far. You better lock your doors and shut your windows tight, pull the shades down and turn off the lights. Always fear the hand that leads to teeth that bite. The first two lines are pretty similar to what we have heard before. More of the Pimp and the Priest trying to scare the people into not crossing his path. The hand that leads the teeth that bite is an interesting phrase. it seems to suggest that Mr. Usher is someone who may offer you a helping hand, only to end up harming you in the end. This is very similar to how the Pimp and the Priest let Hunter feel that he was secure in his position as the mayor before he struck. He lets you feel like you were safe before using that false sense of security against you and turning all of your plans into his. Because if he has no use for you, he'll take you to the river. The river has been used a lot in this story to signify a lot of things. It can symbolize freedom and damnation, or an escape from sin. In this sense, the people of the city are warned that if you are of no use to Mr. Usher, then he will take you and drown you in the river. It also calls back to The Most Cursed of Hands, where it was said that the devil went down to the river. The devil was meant to represent the Pimp and the Priest in that song, so it is fitting that Mr. Usher would also be someone who goes down to the river, given that they are the same person. This segment of the song also uses the theme of the Pimp and the Priest in the background. That is just one of the reasons that I use this theory of them being the same person. They serve very similar functions in the story, and they are also rarely seen together, so I think this fits pretty well, again, even if it does contradict with most people think. He'll have you hanging by a string, or noose if he prefers you perish, all your dreams become nightmarish. Mr. Hunter will either use you as a puppet or kill you. This is similar to how the Pimp and the Priest is using Hunter as his puppet and hints towards his future sinister actions. The working title for Act 6 is also The Hanged Man, which comes from another tarot card. I don't know if that reference was intentional here, but it's cool nonetheless. Hunter is also someone who seems to suffer from nightmarish dreams. Again, he is the example that is being used for someone who is suffering under the wrath of Mr. Usher. He is the example that is being used as a warning, but the Pimp and the Priest can't outright say that so as to not expose himself to the city. If you block his path or plan, yeah, Mr. Usher always gets his man. Mr. Usher always ends up on top at the end. He always takes out the opposition. The Pimp and the Priest is someone who always has the upper hand, even when it seems like he doesn't. His new alter ego shares this trait with him. And that is it for this song. I really enjoyed this song, and it has such a cool jazz sound to it that is so different from everything else that we have heard on the acts. Again, I know my theory is a bit out there, but I think that the story ends up better for it. I'm not in any way trying to say that Casey wrote a bad story, just that he wrote one with many different interpretations, and I find this particular interpretation to be the most complete and compelling. Track 8, The Haves Have Not. Our next song is a duet featuring the talented Gavin Castleton. He is an artist that has worked with Casey in the past, and it's quite rare to hear another voice on these albums, so it ends up being a really cool moment. His voice is also just perfect for the song. The story of this song is that of Hunter and the Pimp and the Priest having a conversation about the worth of the people in the city. The Pimp and the Priest insist that taking advantage of them is no big deal, since they're really just pawns in his big game. Hunter holds on to hope and seems to think otherwise. Just look at that shopkeeper, peddling his wares, shouting his sales pitch, but nobody cares. This first verse is sung by the Pimp and the Priest. As he and Hunter walk through the city, he points out a man who tries to sell his goods to those around him. He is completely ignored. This reinforced the Pimp and the Priest's nihilism, the idea that nothing matters. This was actually a philosophy that Hunter had earlier in his life, but seems to have grown a real connection to the people of the city. He originally just wanted to destroy the Pimp and the Priest, but now he feels that his responsibility as a mayor is to lift up those around him. This change in mindset was most likely spurred from the way that the citizens treated him at the end of the Act 4 song, If All Goes Well. In that song, they implored Hunter to lead them into brilliance. They seemed to really care for him, and it was the first time in decades that anyone had truly believed in him. It is due to this belief that he chooses to protect them from the evil of the Pimp and the Priest. Don't you wonder what keeps him there day after day, begging for gold as his hair turns to gray? The Pimp and the Priest is making the point that all anyone wants in this life is money. The shopkeeper spends every day trying to sell his wares to no one because he wants to become rich. This is how the Pimp and the Priest justifies his actions at the church and the dime. He is simply trying to make a living just like everyone else. Blindly, they're bounding apace, starving for mercy in a merciless place. The Pimp and the Priest sees the world as a merciless place. This may serve to dig at Hunter even more, as he has rarely been shown mercy in his own life. Maybe it is in this moment that Hunter remembers that he was spared by the poison woman back in Act 3. The idea that morality is worthless is what drives the Pimp and the Priest. He just does what he wants in order to make money. He also seems to get some joy in making others suffer as well. We explored that in the Act 4 song, Wait. It was then that we learned that he is someone who doesn't believe in God and merely uses his life as the priest as a disguise. Only a fool would make martyrs from heathens and find them so lively when they're barely breathing, just barely breathing. The Pimp and the Priest finds Hunter's determination to save those in the city to be foolish. A heathen is a non-believer or an outcast. Hunter is someone who sees himself in these people and does what he can to support them and give them grace. We also see that the Pimp and the Priest sees these people as on death's door anyway. They are just barely breathing to him. This goes to reinforce his massive ego. He sees himself as one of the only true living beings in the world. The irony is that his actions have turned him into something closer to a monster than a man. Just look at that toy maker grinding his gears, turning no profit, but he doesn't care. Our second verse is sung by Hunter, who provides the Pimp and the Priest with an alternate point of view. He points out a toy maker who works day in and day out but doesn't seem to make any meaningful profit from his business. The difference between the toy maker and the shopkeeper is that the toy maker doesn't seem to mind that he isn't making any money. This serves to reinforce Hunter's point that money isn't the sole driving factor in one's life, and there are more important things to the people of the city than turning a simple profit. He keeps smiles on faces day after day. The children keep sadness and suffering at bay. This is the reason that the toy maker sells his toys so cheap. He wants the children of the city to be happy. Again, this is wholly opposed to what the Pimp and the Priest believes about human nature. Some people merely want to lift others up, and they are worth believing in and saving no matter the cost. Blissfully bounding apace, searching for mercy in a merciless place. A slight variation on what we heard the Pimp and the Priest sing on the last chorus. I find it interesting that Hunter also refers to this world as a merciless place here. Perhaps he believes that mercy is something that must be created by those who are virtuous enough to extend it to those around them. It is easy to view the world as numb and cold if you never take a moment to look past what you see around you. Those that search for mercy and light will always find it. The toy maker is the perfect example of this principle. Only a monster makes fodder from saints and finds them so worthless when they're so full of grace, so full of grace. Hunter tells the Pimp and the Priest that he sees his actions as monstrous, turning the men into lustful beasts at the dime and coercing young women into working for him. Hunter is unable to see how the Pimp and the Priest is able to dismiss these people that he finds so full of grace. But what better use of hookers and thieves than greasing the wheels of perfect machines that hum into life, a harmony of industry? The Pimp and the Priest views these people as nothing more than grease for his great machine. He sees them as fodder that he can collect money from over and over again. Whereas Hunter sees his business as wholly distasteful, the Pimp and the Priest sees it as an industry. These lines also call into mind the idea of the Industrial Revolution that would be happening at this time. This would see workers starting to work in dangerous factories, and we would start to see entire forests leveled to make room for human expansion. The workers in this case are just another cog in the machine that is the rapid expansion of the human race. But what is the use of cutting them down to smother and choke the soul of our town? Hunter questions why things have to be this way. He sees something greater for these people rather than being used as simple workers and customers in order to line the pockets of the greedy and rich who live so far above them. I know there is another way. We don't know what Hunter truly sees for these people. Maybe he imagines a society where everybody takes care of each other, a society where they are taught to be preached to by someone who has good intentions rather than solely looking for more and more money. But what is so wrong with giving them purpose? This next section is one where Hunter and the Pimp and the Priest are singing over each other. All of Hunter's lines will be put into parentheses. Here we see that the Pimp and the Priest views what he does to the people of the city as giving them purpose. This is a sentiment that is shared by a lot of rich and powerful people. They think that sending someone to work in a factory for 10 hours a day to barely make a living is somehow filling them with purpose. The reality is that most people work to live and not live to work. Just how could you weed them out, degrading them without doubt? Hunter seems unable to see how someone could so callously dismiss the lives of those around them. He doesn't want to see these people suffer and can't fathom that any amount of money would make him happy if everyone else in the city was suffering. A man like yourself could bring worth to the worthless. Hunter is being persuaded to give the city over freely to the wishes of the Pimp and the Priest. He is told that by turning these people into lustful, sinful machines, they will finally have worth in the eyes of the world. Hunter is not swayed by this, however, as he has too much faith in redemption. He needs to, or else he is heading for hell after he dies. You're bleeding them dry, they live and die like you and I. Hunter pleads with the pimp and the priest to view the other people of the city as humans just like they are. He can't fully dismiss them if he remembers that they are living, breathing people who deserve to make a good life for themselves. Without the guidance of rulers and tyrants, these people will just tear themselves apart. The pimp and the priest cannot see that these people will ever survive in the world if they aren't coerced and led by an iron fist. Perhaps he thinks Hunter should govern more harshly and is trying to extort more from him and even more control over the city. And under your guidance, the hands of a tyrant, these people will just tear themselves apart. Hunter knows that surrendering the city to the pimp and the priest will ultimately lead to the destruction of everyone in it. He's willing to fight for them until the end and won't comply with these demands. This starts the final conflict where the pimp and the priest realizes that he can no longer coerce Hunter through fear of exposing him to the city. He has to do something more. Just look at that charlatan steeped in deceit, a threat to the young, to the old and the meek. Here we have Hunter singing to himself about the pimp and the priest. He is someone who is a danger to all of those around him, especially those who lack confidence in themselves. He knows this because he was once a meek boy who was taken advantage of him back in Act 2. Don't you wonder what made him so vicious, so sick, so far out of balance, so cruel and so callous, so married to malice? As we are left to ponder just how the pimp and the priest became who he is, we get a familiar melody before the next song starts. It is the same chords that were used back in the Act 4 song, Wait. In that song, I postulated that it was about how the pimp and the priest lost his faith when he was young and turned into his evil deeds. I believe the end of this song is telling us to find the answer to Hunter's question back in Wait. This is why I was so adamant that that song was about the pimp and the priest, despite the fact that it is widely accepted to be about Hunter and misleading. Again, more headcanon that I think makes the story a little bit more satisfying in my opinion. This song is one of the standouts on the album. We rarely get true duets on these albums, and this song chose the perfect subject matter to tackle. I think it feels like it's ripped straight out of a musical, and Gavin and Casey's voices complement each other so perfectly. Track 9, Light. This next song is my wife's favorite song by the Deer Hunter, and it's easy to see why. It's calming and sweet and something that you don't get all too often on these albums. This is another song sung by Hunter, but it introduces us to our last new character in the story, Hunter and Misleading's son. I'm going to refer to their son as the boy in order to clear up any confusion, since the term the son is already used to describe Hunter's half-brother. My guess is that Misleading and the boy are living at the lake, and the boy is most likely still an infant. This is the life that Hunter wanted to withdraw to. This song could be Hunter literally singing to the boy, or it could be him leaving a note for him in case he were to ever perish. The song is beautiful, and it just shows the tender side of the man who has been beaten down through his entire life. Despite all of this, Hunter still finds hope. Son, your father's not all good. The term all good could be used to describe someone that is suffering from a mental illness. I believe that Hunter is still struggling with his PTSD, but that this line could also be a reference to Hunter's position in life. I believe that Hunter is literally telling the boy that his father is someone who has done some bad things throughout the course of his life. But still, I love you more than I thought I could. Calling back to the Act 4 song, The Old Haunt, Hunter said that he could never find a way to keep the love in him. Now it seems that he is able to love those around him and has created a life full of love for both the boy and Misleading. He has finally learned to love again, which was hinted at the end of the Act 3 finale song, Life and Death. And when the menace in my mind finds me, I simply look to your eyes. The menace in Hunter's mind is the PTSD that he suffers from. When he is attacked by fear and anxiety, he finds that he can ground himself in his love for the boy. Hunter has finally found stability in his turbulent life and sees that his existence is necessary for the survival of those around him. And boy, someday I hope I do see the man you will grow into. Hunter isn't sure that he will make it long enough to see his son grow into a man, but he is holding out hope either way. This whole situation calls to mind the cyclical nature of this story. Hunter started out as the son of a prostitute living by the lake. Now his son has been born of a former sex worker as well, and he also lives by the lake. The key difference between Hunter and the boy is that the boy is surrounded by two loving parents who can take care of him without needing misleading going back to work at the dime. In the same vein as Miss Therese, however, Hunter is forced to work as the mayor supporting the pimp and the priest. He's in a very similar situation to Miss Therese. And when your heart's in disarray, know that your father, too, has made mistakes. Hunter's biggest piece of advice to the boy is to remember that everyone makes mistakes. Hunter always saw his mother as a perfect woman because she kept all the worst parts of herself from him. Now, Hunter can see the damage that is caused and isn't holding back all of the dark parts of himself for his son. This is sweet because it allows the boy to know that even the people that he looks up to the most are capable of messing up. I'm sure Hunter hopes the boy has an easier life than he did, but he can still offer the boy some hope even after all that he may do to screw up his life. Son, your father's lost his head. Still, I mean every word that I've said. Here we get a hint as to how Hunter goes through periods of PTSD where he can't remember where he is. He might get scary or emotional during these moments, but he urges the boy to believe in all the good that he has said about him. Although he is currently incapacitated, this version of him is merely an illusion, and the true Hunter is the loving father. Though the truth can truly cut here in this confessional with my blood. This song could be said as a confessional with Hunter's blood. That being that the boy is literally Hunter's bloodline. He admits that the details of his life are messy and discouraging, but the boy needs to know of his own mistakes in order to be able to stay away from making the same bad decisions as his father. I've been cruel to the ones who have stayed by my side. Here we have Hunter confessing his sins to the boy. This line seems to call to mind misleading. She is now the one who has stayed by his side, and he reflects on how cruelly he treated her back at the end of Act 2. It might be hard to remember now, but Hunter said some really nasty things about her in Dear Misleading. It is also implied that he forced himself on her in Red Hands. Hunter knows that this cruelty wasn't warranted, and he is ashamed of his actions. We love to see some character growth from Hunter, so these lines are great. And foolish enough to believe in my pride. Hunter is now thinking about how he was so eager to grab power back in Act 4. He might also be thinking that his act of taking on the son's identity was a prideful one as well. He thought he was clever enough to fool everyone, but it was that pride that led him to becoming a pawn of the pimp and the priest. But vanity never could keep me from caring for you. Despite all of his character flaws and bad attributes, none of that has ever stopped Hunter from loving the boy. He is probably spending hours every day commuting to the city in order to do his job, but he still makes it home every night to be with the boy. His position as mayor has not made him ashamed of his son born out of wedlock. I've strayed too far away from the trees and the lake, the innocent road that I chose not to take. Hunter laments that he made the wrong decision to leave his home and journey out into the world. This seems like it brings him some pain, but it was also because of this decision that he was able to become a father in the first place. I've said before that Hunter staying at the lake would not have been sustainable for him. He would have grown up in complete isolation after Miss Therese ended her own life. In that way, it was her who made the decision for him to leave. But still, I can bring you to bathe in the river, to wash out the world long before your hearts withered away. These lines call to mind the act of baptism, that Hunter can bring his son to the river to be forgiven of his sins. While Hunter might feel that he himself is too far gone for forgiveness, he will do everything he can to ensure that the boy won't suffer the same fate as him. And that is it for this song. It was a little lighter on the analysis side, but the song speaks for itself musically. It's just so beautiful and peaceful sounding, and one of the few Deer Hunter songs that I could probably put on like a sleep playlist. And this was another one of the singles that was released before the full album came out. I remember just being blown away by how beautiful it sounded. This is another great song to introduce to someone who hasn't heard the Deer Hunter before. It isn't super lore heavy, and it's just a good listen all around. Track 10, Gloria. This song was the last of the singles released for this album, and it is another really great song. It has what is potentially the best guitar solo in the Deer Hunter's catalog, which is saying something because Casey can absolutely shred. The song takes place after Hunter has returned to the city. With Misleading and the boys safe at the lakeside home, Hunter once again returns to the opium den. This time he starts to hallucinate as the effects of the drug take hold. While his hallucinations during the moon/awake were more sinister, these are somewhat invigorating to Hunter. Open-eyed oversight led me to here. Hunter is again looking back at his life, and he realizes that all of the pieces that formed his doomed fate were in front of him all along. He just couldn't bring himself to put them all together. If he could have seen the pimp and the priest for who he truly was, then he wouldn't be in this situation. Looking for an avenue to simply appear. Hunter now wants there to be some way to escape his situation. He has been holding out hope that a solution will be presented to him, and he is quickly realizing that he needs to take an active role in this story if things are to turn in his favor. This could also be a reference to Hunter always taking the path of least resistance in his life. He was always sitting around waiting for an avenue to open up. He would always take those roads without much thought, as he never took much care to plan things out. One too many steps into the wrong direction, leading me to throw up my hands. Again, Hunter realizes that he is on the wrong path, and now feels that he doesn't have any control in his life. The image of throwing up his hand is one that again calls back to the devil's poker game. Instead of trying to continue the game with the pimp and the priest, Hunter is going to throw his cards away and stop trying to play by his rules. Soon, I'll know exactly where I stand, found in a flood of incendiary plans. Hunter can tell that the end of this story is coming soon. He knows that he will take drastic action in the next couple of days, and is getting visions of fire as he hallucinates from the opium. The term incendiary plans is fitting of anything that Hunter plans to do because he is the fire to Mystery's flame. All of the plans that he makes are incendiary in that way. Oh, I've been falling fast into the rhythms without rhymes. This song in particular plays with unconventional rhyme schemes. The first two lines of the verse rhyme, but then the next two do not. In that way, this line is a meta reference to how the song is structured, just a cool little detail. This is also a reference to how Hunter has lived his life for the past couple years as someone with no purpose. He moves to the rhythm that everyone else does, but he has no meaning in his actions. His life has no rhyme or reason to it. I won't be giving up again. Yeah, I'll be getting up again. Hunter is determined to start taking drastic action against the pimp and the priest. Remember, his biggest fear was being discovered as a fraud. Now he has more to live for than his social status. He is a father and has a life with misleading. Maybe being kicked out of office of mayor wouldn't be the worst thing for him. He could still live out the rest of his life with his family. I heard a voice. It said, "Et dolore magna Gloria. Bring me your heart, and then you will awake in a state of surprising euphoria, but don't tell anyone." The Latin phrase in these lines translates to, "From great pain comes glory." That could be a motto to Hunter's entire life. These words that he is hearing are from someone that is giving him advice. It is up to debate as to who is giving it. My bet is that it's either Mystery from beyond the grave, or maybe the oracles have come back once more to give him his final piece of advice. Either way, the voice instructs Hunter to surrender his heart to them, and he will awake in a euphoric state. This could be a simple reference to the act of using opium, but I believe it is saying that if Hunter puts his whole heart into his actions, he will find redemption in the next life. The voice also tells Hunter not to tell anyone. Maybe this is a simple test for Hunter to keep these words to himself. This is a theme that shows up a lot in religious mythology. Those who are visited by gods or spirits are tasked with keeping the knowledge they receive to themselves until it is the right time to reveal it. I was in love with inner ambiguity. Another reference to Hunter's double life as the son. When he first took on the identity of his half-brother, he was in love with the way it made him feel. He was able to find a new home with the mother, and all seemed well until she passed away and the dream came crashing back down. Then I learned to turn emotions into weaponry. Through his campaign to become mayor, Hunter learned how to use his anger to destroy his enemies. This was seen in the way that he shut down the dime. He used his rage and regrets to hurt those who had crossed him in the past. One too many words said with the wrong inflection, leading me to throw up my hands. I see this as a reference to how Hunter was caught in his lie by the pimp and the priest. If he had held his tongue and been more diplomatic, maybe the pimp and the priest would have never covered his true identity. It seems that it was the malice in Hunter's voice that clued him into who Hunter really was. Am I giving up the ghost again? Surrendering so that my evils will amend? Hunter is having a hard time keeping his identity straight. He was resolved to give up his old life, but has clearly fallen back into his true identity. Now he has to actively balance his life as Hunter and the son, given his life with misleading and the boy. He also feels that maybe finally giving up his false identity would be enough to amend the evils that he has committed. Maybe if he were to come clean to the rest of the city, they wouldn't be as mad as he thinks. There are so many paths for him to take, and he can't decide what is right and what will lead him into more trouble. Oh, I've been falling fast into the space between the lines. Again, this is another reference to how he feels he is caught between his two lives and will need to make a decision sooner or later about who he truly is. Now, I've never heard that sound before. I'm nothing but an infant wave stuck in a savage ocean. The second line is an obvious callback to the Act 4 song, Waves. Hunter feels that he is caught up in a conflict that may be too intense for him to handle. Nevertheless, he will continue on and follow through with his newfound determination. Don't fear the words that I say. It seems that the advice that this mysterious voice that Hunter is hearing is somewhat intimidating. This could be a reference to the Bible. Whenever an angel appears to someone, they typically start off with the phrase, "Be not afraid." Hunter is being visited by a spirit and is likewise being told to not be afraid of what he is seeing and hearing. And that will do it for Gloria. I think this is one of the more commercially viable songs on the album. It has a great guitar solo and doesn't have too much lore to it. It is similar to Light in that way. But I'm also eager to get back into the very lore-heavy songs, and luckily these last 5 songs in the album deliver a ton of amazing story moments, so buckle up. Track 11, The Flame Is Gone. This song is all about the pimp and the priest convincing himself to take drastic measures against Hunter. We know that something major has happened since Gloria that has shaken him to his core. My guess is that Hunter gave him an ultimatum. Shut down the dime or I'll expose you for who you really are to everyone. The pimp and the priest is worried because Hunter seems to not mind being outed as the imposter now. He has his family and he couldn't care less about being hated by the rest of the city. Misleading and the boy are enough for him. This song mirrors the Act 4 song, The Line. Both are about a character talking within themselves. I see you trembling like the earth is falling from your feet, like you've never felt the ground before. This is a clear reference to how Hunter felt at the end of the Act 4 finale song, Ouroboros. In that song, Hunter said that he felt nothing below him, that he felt all of the ground he'd gained was taken away. Now the pimp and the priest feels this way since his leverage is effectively useless against Hunter. An indication that you're over your head again, that you don't know how to settle the score. I don't know if it's intentional or not, but there was a song in the Color Spectrum series by the Deer Hunter that is called We've Got a Score to Settle. I feel that song and this one have a lot of similarities, especially given what the pimp and the priest will decide to do. I would be lying if I told you that I didn't know the way that you could fix it all. The pimp and the priest has an idea in the back of his head that could solve his problems. It seems that he doesn't want to quite go to such a length yet though. He has never gone so far in the past and doesn't want to entertain this mysterious idea. If you're stacking your problems like a pile of bricks, you've got to knock down the wall. This metaphor is similar to what we talked about with Hunter earlier in The Moon/Awake. The pimp and the priest must go scorched earth if he is to solve the issue of Hunter. He can't coerce his way out of this one. He has to take more drastic measures. Before someone like you breaks you and puts you in the ground. The pimp and the priest sees this world as kill or be killed. If he can't destroy Hunter, then he will surely be destroyed by him. Hunter and the pimp and the priest could be seen as similar given that they both live double lives and both command a lot of power in the city. Do the heavens ever spare the crop when the winter falls? And could we really hide if the reaper calls? The pimp and the priest's plan involves death. He is rationalizing murder since he knows that everyone will die someday. Him committing a murder is just bringing fate to someone just a little sooner than it may have come otherwise. It's very Anton Chigurh of him. And so it goes, the lamb will be led to the loam, and you will return. I'll stop being coy about the pimp and the priest's plan. He is going to kill Misleading. He feels that if he can kill her, Hunter will be heartbroken enough to be broken and malleable again. Hunter is someone who has crumbled into despair before, and the Pimp and the Priest thinks this is his perfect opportunity to make him crumble again. I see a hesitating grimace held above your chin, like you haven't thought of this before. The Pimp and the Priest is now somewhat pleased at his new idea. He has all the pieces put in place. If she dies, then he can simply blame the murder on the mysterious Mr. Usher that is on his way to town. He already made sure that everyone knew how ruthless he was, and he would make the perfect scapegoat for his crime. And though sentiment keeps you from letting go, you know it's irresistible. We have to remember that Misleading isn't another random stranger to the Pimp and the Priest. He knows her personally since she used to work at the dime. While he is a heartless man, it seems that he has some reservations about killing someone that he has such personal ties to. This thought doesn't stay for long, and he can't resist what he sees as a perfect plan to finally gain control over Hunter's life for good. To hear those voices hush, you must be cold, in times when peace of mind is bought and sold. It seems that Hunter may be spreading the rumor of the Pimp and the Priest's double life to those in the town. They are the voices that are whispering about who he really is. It is this rumor that has caused him to lose control over the town and made him consider doing such a terrible thing. The Pimp and the Priest is also someone who can be said to sell peace of mind. He is the town priest after all, and it is he who charges the citizens for their absolution. If he were to be discovered as a fraud, then all of that would come crumbling down. During this section, we also get a guitar riff that was heard back in the Act 2 song, Where the Road Parts. It's a really subtle part of that song, and it serves to reinforce the idea that the person that the Pimp and the Priest is thinking about killing is misleading. It's one of my favorite interpolations in all of the acts. Don't you want to see him fall apart so you can pick the pieces up and put him back together? Finally building up the perfect pawn, another shadow lost in the dark, another shadow lost in the dark. There isn't much to say about these lines that we haven't covered already. This is the Pimp and the Priest's plan: to destroy Hunter so badly that he will finally submit to his will. The end of this song is a minor rendition of Melpomene, and this serves to show us that the Pimp and the Priest has followed through with this plan. He has killed Misleading. Now that Misleading is out of the story, I figure we should talk about her role in the acts. I really like her as a character, and I like that she wasn't simply used as a plot device for Act 2. She and Hunter seem to have a real connection, and I like that they were able to rekindle the relationship in this album, even if it was only for a little while. One of my absolute favorite moments in all of these albums is at the end of A Night on the Town off of Act 4. This is the moment where Hunter sees her again, and then we get this piano melody from Meeting Misleading. It's just a brilliant moment of using music to tell the story. Overall, I think she's a great character, and I was really happy to learn that so many of the songs off of Act 2 were from her point of view. It makes her feel like a big part of this universe, and not simply someone who came and went in Hunter's life. She ended up being everything to him, and I'm glad that she and Hunter had a son together to continue their legacy. With that, we finish our analysis of The Flame is Gone. The title is fitting, giving that Mystery and Misleading were both ladies of the dime. In the way that Mystery dies, now Misleading is gone from Hunter's life, and we are ready to see what remains. Track 12, The Fire Remains. No need to be shy about it, the Pimp and the Priest done messed up this time. This next song is all about Hunter's response to the murder of his lover. The Pimp and the Priest bet on the fact that he would destroy Hunter, but it has only filled him with more determination to stop him once and for all. Now that the flame is gone, referring to Misleading this time, Hunter will take his revenge as the Fire. The Pimp and the Priest was able to destroy the two most important women in his life, but Hunter is done feeling sorry for himself and knows that he can finally enact his plan that he came up with in Gloria. For so long have my teeth held my tongue from a venomous voice. Here we have Hunter talking about how he has kept the secret of the Pimp and the Priest. He has spent years doing his bidding in order to keep his secret safe, but he won't do so any longer. The term venomous voice also calls back to the other time when Hunter took decisive action in the story, when he poisoned his father back in Act 3. But the poison has passed from my lips to my hands, an incendiary ploy. This line calls back to the incendiary plans that were mentioned back in Gloria. Hunter's hatred of the Pimp and the Priest was previously reserved for the terrible things that he would say about him. His plan was to spread the rumor of his double life. Now he knows that words are not enough, and he needs to show him that he is serious. And hell will open up its flue. I bear my soul through the flames before me. and you will witness what the fire can undo. With these lines, we get a hint as to what Hunter is doing. He is burning the dime to the ground. This is especially poetic because the entire story started with Miss Therese attempting to burn the dime down. She was unsuccessful, but Hunter will not be. He says that hell itself is opening up to swallow the dime. Through this act, he is undoing the wrongs that he has done in the past. He is destroying the establishment that he helped create and burning down the remnants of where his pain first started. He knows that this act will surely result in the pimp and the priest exposing him, so in this way, he is baring his soul to all of those around him. Far from the ash, I will be born again, where every debt is repaid. Hunter hopes that with the destruction of the dime, he will finally find the redemption that he thought impossible. Maybe he also hopes that the people of the city will see that all he has done is destroy a great place of evil and sin. Maybe they won't be so hard on him after he fully exposes the pimp and the priest. Nothing left to keep me out of paradise as portraits of the past fade away. The images of his past sins and misdeeds are fading away as the dime burns to the ground. We can now be assured that the voice back in Gloria told him to burn the dime down in order to be forgiven of all that he has done. Whether this will actually give him forgiveness is still unknown. The id dots the i's of antiquity, while the ego of late has held sway. These are another set of lines that sound like something only the deer hunter could write. The id is the primal, carnal instinct that is in each person, while the ego is the more calculating, logical side. These lines say that the earlier actions of Hunter in Act 2 through 4 were fueled by the id. He was driven by his lustful desires and acted in reactionary ways. The word antiquity is just another way to refer to something old. The id is what took care of those actions that he took that led him to this point. Now the ego is in charge. He is making decisions that have some rhyme or reason to them. He is striking the pimp and the priest where it hurts. This line also calls back to the Act 2 song, Where the Road Parts. On that song, Misleading sang that her ego was running her. Now it is Hunter's ego that drives him. Too foolish to stray past the line, but too weary to stay, too weary to stay. These lines call back to the song The Line off of Act 4. It seems that Hunter is unwilling to stay in his current state and now takes this opportunity to shed the identity of the son and be reborn as himself. At least, that's what he should do. He says he is too foolish to commit to this action fully, but is too tired to continue on. The burning of the dime lands in the awkward middle ground between his life as the son and his actions as Hunter. Far too long have I waited to witness the balances bend in the favor of wrongs being remedied, wickedness coming to an end. Hunter has waited far too long for something to be done about the pimp and the priest. He hoped that he would be brought to justice by the society around him, but that never happened. Now, Hunter decides to place his thumb on the scale of justice and take matters into his own hands. In a way, this is similar to how he felt at the end of Act 3. He decided to take action and kill his father. I think the circumstances are quite different, as Hunter's actions are now fueled by his desire to save those in the city. This action is less opportunistic, and one that he knows will be bad for his double life. He is willing to give himself up to save those around him. Far beyond the act, I will be whole again, a phoenix out of the flame. The first line is a reference to his act of burning the dime to the ground, but also a cool fourth wall break. Beyond the story of Act 5, Hunter believes that he will be returned to his complete self. The second line is a reference to the mythical phoenix. They are creatures who burst into flames upon death, but are then reborn from the ashes. Hunter hopes to be reborn in the ashes of the dime. I'm burying that menace in a memory, a funeral held in my name. It seems that Hunter is trying to shed the menace in his mind that he sang to the boy about in Light. He also hopes that this act will serve as a proper funeral for the son, the man who never got a proper funeral. This action is not only a death and rebirth for Hunter, but a chance to finally give the spirit of the son some closure. The ritual pyres sending smoke to the sky as the building continues to burn. Hunter sees the burning of the building as a ritual pyre, which is usually a burnt offering for the dead. Oftentimes, this includes the burning of the dead itself. It is from this that we can gather that Misleading was most likely killed at the dime. Perhaps she was lured there by the pimp and the priest. Now Hunter burns the building as the final tribute to her memory, destroying the place that caused her so much pain throughout her life. The wrath and the ruin, the pain and the grave, as the lies are returned to the urn. The destruction of the building is Hunter's wrath and retribution for the pimp and the priest killing Misleading. Now that the dime is gone, the pimp and the priest will no longer be able to continue his lies and schemes that he uses to extract money from the people of the city. Those lies are being retired along with the ashes of Misleading. But we can't keep the embers from catching, the truth from destroying us all. Hunter knows that his actions will expose the pimp and the priest, but also himself. This is the final act that he will take before being exposed as a fraud to the rest of the city. This action might just end up destroying the city that he has given up so much to defend. There is also another more literal interpretation from these lines, that being that the burning of the dime has also set the church on fire. I said before that the church and the dime most likely shared a wall. They were close to each other. Now the burning of the dime has caused the church to be set alight. Hunter is destroying both of the pimp and the priest's biggest establishments. Do I die as the martyr or miscreant? I'll make the call. I'll make the call. Hunter is left to decide whether he will go down as the son, the martyr, or Hunter, the miscreant. He can deny any wrongdoing and attempt to continue his life as the mayor, or he can accept it and admit that he isn't who he says he is. Maybe he will try to come clean before the pimp and the priest can truly expose him, then he will still have the upper hand. Brothers and sisters. The end of this song is the sound of the church and the dime burning. As the fire gets louder, so do the cries of the people of the city. They are angry and want to know who set the church on fire. In the chaos, one voice speaks to them above the crowd. It is the voice of the pimp and the priest. Track 13, The March. This is my personal favorite song on this album. It is truly the moment where everything in the story comes to a head and has so many fun little moments that interpolate the melodies from the bittersweet 4 and 5, the congregation, and the sermon in the silt. Like I said, this song starts with the pimp and the priest getting ready to speak to what is quickly becoming an angry mob. He has gotten to them before Hunter and is able to explain himself and uses this opportunity to turn the town against Hunter. This is where we see just how gifted of a liar the pimp and the priest is. The beginning of the song is a much more sinister version of the Act 2 song, Smiling Swine. Both of them are about the pimp and the priest. This was one of the songs they played during their most recent tour, and it was definitely one of the highlights of the night for me. Just such an amazing song, and it was the biggest standout on the album the first time I listened to it. If one and all who hear my call could lend their ears to me, then you could hear the crooked tale of how this fire has come to be. The pimp and the priest is calling all of those around him to listen to his version of the events that led to the burning of the church and the dime. By this point, Hunter has been seen celebrating the destruction of the dime, and the pimp and the priest plans to spin this into him celebrating the destruction of the church. The term crooked tale is fitting because the version of events that the pimp and the priest presents are not reflective of what actually happened. He is spinning a narrative in order to gain favor with the town and turn them against Hunter. He needs to regain the upper hand since his plan of killing Misleading didn't result in Hunter bowing down to him. I must admit that the manipulator's fate was resting at my feet. The pimp and the priest admits that he knew who Hunter truly was and could have exposed him. He is trying to admit some fault for something so small as to seem like his version of events is fair and unbiased. Admitting a little sin is much easier than coming clean as the person who is scamming the entire town by running a phony church. But all of his intimidation brought me to my knees when he said, "Keep this secret safe, or watch your flock devoured by the flame left in my wake. I'll burn through you." Here we have the pimp and the priest twisting the truth of what actually happened. This is the running theme of the entire song. In his version of events, Hunter came to him and forced him to keep his secret under threat of burning down the church if he didn't comply. While Hunter did try to intimidate the pimp and the priest and did shut down the dime, it wasn't Hunter who coerced him, it was the opposite. Beyond the twisting of the truth, burning the church down was never part of Hunter's plan. This just ended up being a happy coincidence for the pimp and the priest. There is a vision that you have come to know and love, the deaf defender with a heart of gold. Here we see the pimp and the priest finally out Hunter as a fraud. The deaf defender is the son. He was well liked by the people of the city before he went off to war. That person is merely a vision to the people of the city who don't know who Hunter truly is. It could be that Hunter could have been well liked on his own, but he never gave the city a chance to truly meet him. I believe that Hunter could have accomplished his goals without ever stealing the son's identity. He had the charisma in him to become mayor all along, he just ended up screwing himself over by trying to be someone that he isn't. An imitation of a man he left to die face down in the mud, such venom coursing through his veins. These are the lines that make me believe that the pimp and the priest extorted more information out of Hunter than simply his fake identity. He seems to know that Hunter left the son to die. However, he again twists the narrative to imply that Hunter actually poisoned the son when we know that that wasn't the case. The venom coursing through the veins is a reference to the supposedly poisoned son in place of the father. It is also a reference to the previous song where Hunter said that his venom passed from his lips to his hands. Hunter is now striking with a venom that the pimp and the priest can use to attribute more malice than was originally intended. And now the mimic is a cynic who laughs while the house of God is reduced to ash. Like I mentioned earlier, it seems that Hunter is out celebrating his destruction of the dime. At this point, it is most likely the case that Hunter has returned to the lake and thus can't defend his actions. This doesn't paint him in a good light to the people of the city. It also seems that the pimp and the priest is more concerned with taking revenge on Hunter rather than trying to save the church. Well, I won't let corruption carry on. This is probably the most hypocritical thing that the pimp and the priest could say. He is using this opportunity to fully paint himself as a hero when he is the source of all the corruption in the city. He is seen as brave for taking a stand here, when he is actually engaging in more deceit to further his goals of taking control of Hunter and the city. Come out from the dark and claim your light before you all but fall apart. Another small reference to the Act 4 song, Ouroboros, where Hunter fell apart. Now the pimp and the priest tells the angry mob that destroying Hunter is the only way to save themselves from destruction. We can keep this wolf far from our flock. They now see Hunter as a wolf in sheep's clothing. They think that by killing him they will have cleansed the city of corruption, when it will really only surrender control over to the most vile man there is. Hunter's portrayal as a wolf is also somewhat ironic, given that he has spent the majority of his life feeling very isolated and alone, whereas wolves typically hunt and travel in packs. So raise your voices, torches, rocks, and follow me into the night. We'll bring this evil to the light. The pimp and the priest has now fully constructed his angry mob and is leading them into the night to go find Hunter where he lives. The lake was the one place that Hunter thought he would always be safe from harm. Now he has brought that harm home with him. You tried to take control, but you couldn't with the stolen soul, so we're coming after you tonight, coming after you tonight. The mob is now chanting as they march to Hunter's house. They say that they won't allow Hunter to maintain his control over them with his stolen identity. They seem to be rather mad that they were tricked into believing that he was the son. No word he could uphold, because the only truth he ever told was that there's far too many ways to die, far too many ways to die. This is a fantastic callback to the Act 4 song, The Old Haunt. The mob insists that Hunter must be assumed to lie about everything, that his deceit of them was absolute. The only truth they learned from him is that death comes from everyone. They will now make good on that truth by beating and attacking Hunter. Lost his memories, the end in sight. This line shares the same feel as the lines that were exchanged when Hunter and the pimp and the priest first met in Smiling Swine. Now Hunter has lost himself and his memories. This is to say that his soul and life is now over. With this final revelation, the end is in sight for Hunter as the mob brutally beats him to near death. And that ends this absolute masterpiece of a song. It is such a great listen, and it really pays off incredibly well if you have listened to all the previous albums. The way that the pimp and the priest twist the story into a Hunter essentially taking his place is incredibly reminiscent of the story of the devil and the gambler in The Most Cursed of Hands. Like I said, the mob then attacks and beats Hunter. They don't quite kill him, however. Now they stand and watch as the pimp and the priest stands over the beaten and destroyed Hunter. Track 14, Blood. With the mob surrounding Hunter, he attempts to explain himself. He thinks to himself about everything that he has done that has led him to this point. He holds in his hand his only weapon, a knife that was gifted to him by Miss Therese when he was a child. Silence slights spirits of those gone into the night. Hunter thinks about all those who have died in his path to his own ruin. Miss Therese, the son, the father, and misleading. He knows that sitting in silence won't do anything to help them. If he is simply to lay down and take his beating, becoming a pawn of the pimp and the priest, then their deaths will have meant nothing. But what was the cost? Do I justify the loss? When a loss of control would be digging myself a hole. Again, If Hunter simply lays down, then everybody he has left dead in his wake will have died for nothing. Trying to explain himself to the mob and trying to make amends with the pimp and the priest is just digging a deeper hole for him back to hell. This is a reference to what was said in the Act 3 song, Go Get Your Gun. It couldn't be worth it. Hunter losing control in this moment isn't something that will help him. Losing control could mean surrendering to the pimp and the priest, but it could also mean finally snapping and killing him after all the harm he has caused. At least for now, this isn't what Hunter wants to do. I'm a killer, I'm a killer, I'm a killer, but I have been killing myself all along. Hunter admits to himself that he is, in fact, a killer. He killed the father and no doubt killed enemy soldiers during his time in World War I. Despite this, Hunter feels that he has been truly killing himself the entire time. All of these actions led him closer to damnation. Had I done my best to protect innocence, or did I leave the wolf to the fawn? Everything that Hunter has done to protect the people of the city was undone when he decided to work with the pimp and the priest. He set out to save the city from sin, but he only ended up surrendering control of the city to the pimp and the priest. This final surrender by Hunter would mean that all of his noble intentions were truly for nothing. This is also a parallel to the previous song. In that song, Hunter was depicted as the wolf trying to destroy the flock. Now we see that the pimp and the priest is the true wolf. They each have a monstrous view of the other. Watch your words, keep them from bothering the herd, provoking the stones that they all can throw. As Hunter contemplates what he will say to the mob, he knows that any wrong step will result in his death. This line also calls back to the pimp and the priest encouraging him not to rock the boat back in the Halves Have Not. He wanted Hunter to be okay with everything that he was doing, but he couldn't be. No, I won't carry on living this life that I stole. It just isn't worth it. There is no point in trying to justify his actions. He could very well explain that he simply wanted to destroy the dime, but he knows that he can't be trusted due to his dual identity. He finally decides to shed the sun and fully embrace his life as Hunter. This is fitting given how Hunter's life was full of tragedy. While he may deserve this ending, the sun does not. Hunter will give the memory of the sun the dignity of not being branded as a liar and manipulator. Divining the right from the wrong. Hunter questions whether he should have been the one to decide what is right and what is wrong. Maybe if he had accepted the view that the pimp and the priest has on the world, then he would have been okay with all of his actions. His moral compass was always clawing at him from inside, and it is what allowed him to achieve some sort of redemption for what he has done. Had I done my best to protect innocence, or was there something more wicked in store? Were Hunter's actions those of a man who wanted to protect his fellow men, or were they simply a way to get back at the pimp and the priest? He has always seen himself as the poor victim of a cruel fate, but maybe he was the cruel one in the end. Is there villainy inside of me? I think Hunter is being too harsh on himself here. Everyone has a good and evil side inside of them, and Hunter is no exception. He shouldn't have stolen the identity of the son, and he probably shouldn't have killed the father, but I don't think he could be called the villain of the story. The pimp and the priest is the true villain. He is a million times worse than Hunter, even though he tries to pretend that they are on the same level. In my mind, there is really no comparison between the two. The pimp and the priest literally killed Miss Leading to get a leg up on Hunter when she didn't really do anything wrong. In search of worth, have I burnt the earth? This is a really great callback to The Moon/Awake, where Hunter asked if the way to repair his broken past was to burn the earth. He has now essentially done that and doesn't know if it has brought him any forgiveness or meaning. He can now see that merely burning the dime to the ground wasn't the inaction that provided him any sort of forgiveness. There's no passion in being passive, and no inaction could bring an answer, so for you, I am a killer. Hunter knows that laying down and staying passive won't make anything right. He has to take final, drastic action in order to give some meaning in his life. He admits to his identity as a killer and, in front of the entire mob, kills the pimp and the priest using the knife. As the pimp and the priest dies, we get to hear the theme of the dime play one final time. It is after the death of the pimp and the priest that the crowd, stunned and horrified, descend on Hunter for a final time. They have seen enough. Hunter has burned the church to the ground and now killed their beloved priest. It is time for them to take their revenge. It is also now time for us to talk about the pimp and the priest since he has now exited the story. Man, this guy is just such a good villain. He is so vile and evil and runs a scheme that anyone can see is very clearly harmful to the world around him. He is manipulative and cunning, but also crass and boorish, just such an amazing character. He's often depicted as the classic plague doctor. I find this depiction to be really cool since it adds so much to the mystery of his character. Something that has always been perplexing is how he is able to keep his identity hidden from the rest of the town. Perhaps he wears different masks depending on whether he is at the church or the dime. We can assume that the people of the city don't know who he really is. It is implied that only those close to him know the secret. I would go so far as to say that the only people who truly knew are Mystery, Misleading, and Hunter. Hunter's knowledge is only because it was passed on down to him by Mystery. More and more these days, we get villains that are sympathetic or have seemingly good reasons for doing what they're doing. I really like that Casey and the band didn't try to paint the pimp and the priest in any sort of sympathetic light. He is just evil, and that is what makes him such a great villain for a story like this. Track 15, A Beginning. And now we arrive to the last song on the last act. This is a very bittersweet moment for me, truthfully. Making these videos has been so fun, and I love this band so much. They just also take a ton of time and effort to create, but I'm glad to have created a resource for people who want to learn the story. My hope is that some of the viewers are people who have never heard of the band and have now been exposed to what I see as the most underrated band of our time. If you are one of those people, then thank you so much for watching. It means the world to me. But anyway, like I said, Hunter has been beaten to death by the angry mob. This song is what he experiences as he teeters between life and death. It is all about what awaits him in the next life as he decides to give up and die, or maybe cling on to what little this life has for him and just stay alive a little bit longer. The silence dominates, divining resolutions from my hand. The mob has now left and Hunter is left to lay in silence. As he thinks about the strange juxtaposition between his current state and the serene nature of the quiet night, he sees that the resolution to his story is one that has been predicted from the beginning. Much like a fortune teller would read one's fortune from their hands, Hunter's fate was foretold by the oracles. They told him that the end would come swiftly for him at the beginning of the album, and it seems that they were correct. While it may have taken a little longer than Hunter imagined, the oracles were proven right one final time. Lines drawn in the sand. Again, another callback to the line that was talked about in Act 4. Hunter crossed the line in order to kill the pimp and the priest, and has now faced the consequences of those actions. I think the imagery of sand is also there to invoke the Act 2 song, Black Sandy Beaches. That song was one that encouraged us to imagine a happier ending for Hunter and Misleading. It wanted us to think that they might be happier than they were before they met each other. Perhaps we are meant to view Hunter's death as something that is more sweet than bitter. This is difficult to do as he is leaving behind his son, the boy. Again, this mimics how Mystery died and left Hunter alone in Act 2. He is doing the same thing to his son, and perhaps the cycle of dread and despair will continue through him. We can all just hope that this isn't the case. Maybe he did a better job of preparing the boy for the pains of the world. Maybe he won't be as foolish as Hunter was. But my volitions wry, my temperance twisted, faced with failing light, nothing in my sight. Hunter tries to cling on to life, but he is quickly dying. As he tries to imagine a good afterlife, he can't see anything. His desire to die and be met with some sort of paradise are falling flat. Where most are met with the light at the end of the tunnel, he only sees darkness. If I fall into the ocean, send my soul into the sea, will these reflections trouble me? Will I dream my final dream? If Hunter dies, will the reflection of his twisted life come back to haunt him? Were the actions that he took in life so vile as to disqualify him for any sense of forgiveness? Or will this death simply be his final dream? Will there be nothing after he fades away into darkness? He will soon come to know as the answers to these questions are made known to themselves. In Act 4, we got a lot of Hunter trying to keep his soul out of the ocean, which represented death and hell. Now we see that he is standing over the water and thinks that his soul is destined to sink to the bottom of the abyss. He can't imagine anything greater for him awaits beyond his death. I sensed the silhouette whose standing vigil growing very sore. It seems that someone is standing over Hunter as he is dying. I believe this to be the boy. His son stands over him, unable to do anything to help him. Hunter wants to reach out and explain himself one final time, but seems to be unable to do so. I think the words he shared back in light will be enough to carry the love that he has for his son to him. Just one moment more before I close the curtain, fate uncertain, spirit to the dark, endlessly apart. Hunter wants just one more moment to share with his son before he is cast into the dark. He knows that his final resting place will leave him endlessly apart from those that he loves. He feels that Miss Therese and Miss Leading have secured their spots in paradise, while he will spend an eternity in the darkness. No distant echoes haunting me, no further phantoms will I see, this silence held eternally. While Hunter has assumed he is going to hell, he also can kind of see some good in this. He hopes that the time that he spends there will be one where he can forget about the bodies that he has left in his wake. Maybe he will no longer be haunted by the sun and the memories of his mother. He might also be free of his PTSD. Hunter's mind has to be a truly terrible place, and it seems that he would rather take eternal silence of nothingness rather than having to continue to deal with the troubled thoughts that swirl around his damaged and darkened mind. But what if the silence is broken by the ones you've loved, incredibly present with a heavenly breath to wake you up? Now it seems that Hunter is taking an optimistic view of the afterlife. He is imagining a scenario where he is welcomed into the next life by those he has loved in this one. He hopes that Miss Leading and Miss Therese will accept him and that they can all live together in eternity. This would be the perfect scenario for Hunter, as he has spent his entire adult life missing Miss Therese and hoping that he could be with her again. If he is right, they can spend the afterlife together and he can reclaim that paradise that he misses so much. He never wanted much more than to live a life with her at the lake. Now he will be able to do that throughout all of eternity. With nothing left to poison a portrait of who I've become. The next life will be one where Hunter can be free of the lies that he is told. He can truly be himself and surrender the soul of the sun back to him. This exhausting charade can well and truly be over, as he will have nothing left to hide from. Only elation remains, protecting us from this never-ending night. With his final breaths, Hunter decides to buck the trend that he has been chasing his entire life. He decides to look to the future with optimism. He is no longer scared of death and hell. He is no longer burdened with the heartbreak and his double life. He is ready to meet the next life as it comes to him. That hope is what protects him from the endless despair that he has feared since he was a boy. Dear Apparition, while my senses last, is absolution far too much to ask? Will you forgive a truly troubled past? This is a beautiful and frankly breathtaking callback to The Moon/Awake. Hunter is again seeing this apparition of either himself as a boy or Miss Therese. He asks the spirit for forgiveness. He can see that this life was the one that would have been difficult for anyone to lead, and he knows that he can be forgiven of what he has done. Hunter makes a lot of poor decisions in his life, but he was not dealt a good hand. His mother loved him, but she also kept the truth from him and ended her own life abruptly. He was then left to take on the world with absolutely no knowledge of how it worked, and it led to him being beaten down and brokenhearted. I sympathize with him, and I think that he did all right with what he was given. The silver lining still remains, the sights I've left to see. That silver lining that he mentioned in The Moon/Awake is still there. There is still a chance for him to attain forgiveness. Now he knows that the next life isn't eternal darkness. There will be sights for him to discover wherever he is going. So trust that with this end, a new beginning is waiting patiently. And with that, Hunter finally dies. He dies hoping that with his death, a new beginning can start. A new life for himself, for his son, and for the city which is now unburdened by the pimp and the priest. The last instrumental section is the theme of the lake. It is what we heard to start the entire story back in Act 1. It is such a haunting, yet beautiful piano melody that captures the brilliance and tragedy of the story of Hunter's life. It is a truly perfect ending. And that is the end of the Deer Hunters Act 5, Hymns with the Devil and Confessional. This album is brilliant and a wonderful way to cap off the story. Now it is time to discuss Hunter himself as a protagonist and look at some alternate stories. Hunter is a really great main character in my opinion. He is someone who doesn't always make the best decisions, but he does always make the most interesting decisions. I love how you can see him grow up throughout the story from a scared and confused boy into a man who holds his own ideals and uses his power to destroy the evil of the city. Throughout the entire story, he still retains his love for Miss Therese and does what he can to honor her legacy. I think that is beautiful, and it shows that he truly does have a good heart deep down. I think it is really cool to see his transformation from being the scared driver for the pimp and the priest to being his primary adversary. He's also much less of an audience surrogate than most cryptic narratives use. He is a complex character who hides his emotions behind cryptic clues and lyrics. That's what makes these albums so fun to dissect and analyze. Like I've mentioned before, these analysis videos are my own personal interpretations, and they won't always line up with what Casey said about the story, and I think it's fair that I look at some plot points that I didn't cover and what they would mean for the story. The biggest one would be the presence of Mr. Usher as a separate character in the story, rather than being a myth made up by the pimp and the priest. He is widely accepted to be a new entity that sings with Hunter in The Haves Have Not. He is the one who convinces Hunter and the pimp and the priest to settle their differences once and for all. This means that the song The Flame Is Gone is about Mr. Usher convincing the pimp and the priest to kill Misleading, and not the pimp and the priest convincing himself to do it. I think that removing Mr. Usher as a separate character makes the story conclude better. It just means that all of our main characters are dead and the story can finally conclude. And this is, I guess, all assuming that we aren't getting an Act 6. Casey has said that Hunter didn't die at the end of this album because he will die in a far more dramatic way in Act 6, and I would love to be proven wrong and thinking that Act 6 will never be made, but I think that the story concludes great if it stays how it is. I think, if Act 6 ever does release, then you can expect a very long analysis video from me. It'll make this video right here look like an episode of SpongeBob. But until then, I will continue to listen to the 5 acts that we have and just marvel at the musical genius that is on display. This series of albums is truly beautiful, and I love hearing how the musicality of each album increases and improves. My absolute dream would be a full remake of Acts 1 and 2 with the full orchestration that we hear on Acts 4 and 5. The live versions of these albums are also fantastic, and they update the sound and kind of give a really solid new quality to them, so that's been really cool. Even though this series of album analysis is done, I will still be analyzing albums on a regular basis. These videos are just way too fun to make, and I'm definitely going to use these format to discuss other albums that I really love. I've kind of had a hard time finding out what I'm going to do with this channel, but these album analysis videos seriously are so fun to make, and the response has been great, and I love interacting with especially the Deer Hunter community, but just the community of bands that I love. And so my next analysis video is going to be on the album Plans by Death Cab for Cutie. They're another formative band from my youth, and so I'm really gonna love diving in deep to that album and what that is saying. Obviously it'll be a little different from these videos since the Deer Hunter does tell a cohesive story, and Plans isn't really a concept album, but I do want to analyze just the lyrical devices and everything that's being used in those. So you can look forward to that. I'm really excited to get started working on that as soon as I finish this one. Like always, please subscribe if you haven't. If you have made it this far into the video, then just thank you so much. The idea that anyone would sit and listen to me talk about music for 2 hours is truly amazing and humbling. The support on these videos has been truly insane and incredible, and I hope that they will become a part of the Deer Hunter community. I hope that if you look up the Deer Hunter Act 4, Act 5, this video will show up pretty close to the top so people can get just a better understanding of what this story truly means. There's a couple of YouTubers online that do kind of reaction videos to the Deer Hunter's music. There's one by Secondhand Reactions, I think is the name of their channel. They have a great Deer Hunter album reaction series, and they seem to really love this stuff. So if you haven't checked out their stuff, please go check that out, because it's just so satisfying to hear somebody else hear all that music for the first time, especially because they really get into the story and make their own theories about it, and they just really love and appreciate the sound. It was just super cool to see. So again, Secondhand Reactions have a wonderful series. Go check them out. It was been super fun for me to watch. And then thank you so much for those that I met at the Seattle show. It was super fun getting to know you guys, and just meeting somebody that recognized me from YouTube was a really surreal moment. And just thank you to everybody who continues to show their support for this amazing band. And thank you to Casey and all the other band members that just make the absolute best music on the planet. And I think that's going to do it for this video, so please go back and watch my other explained videos if you haven't already. I also have my own personal music up on this channel, and an interview with some amateur musicians that was a ton of fun to make. Like I said, you can be on the lookout for more album explained videos coming forward. I'm going to be doing that Death Cab for Cutie one, which I don't think will be as long as this video, because this video is over 2 hours, which is kind of insane. But again, thank you guys so much for the support, and I'm going to see you guys later. Alright, see ya.